History is not a straight line. It's a maze of locked doors. Some were sealed by time, others by those who feared what lay behind them. Across ruined cities, lost libraries, and buried machines, traces remain of knowledge that shouldn't have survived, yet did. How were stones cut with impossible precision? Why do maps remember places we're told were unknown? And what truths vanished the moment they were discovered? Tonight, we follow the evidence, through 3 hours of humanity's most guarded mysteries. No myths, no hype, just clues, context, and questions that refuse to fade. So relax and let's dive in. In the wide, fertile Chengdu Plain of southwestern China, the land appears quiet. Flat fields, slow rivers, and distant hills softened by mist. Nothing about the landscape immediately suggests upheaval or mystery. And yet, beneath this ordinary ground, archaeologists uncovered one of the most puzzling discoveries of the modern era. Sanxingdui. Buried for more than 3,000 years, its artifacts emerged not as fragments of daily life, but as deliberate offerings, broken, burned, and hidden, as if sealed away from memory itself. The first major discoveries came in the 1980s, when 2 large sacrificial pits were excavated. Inside were objects unlike anything previously associated with ancient China. Towering bronze masks with exaggerated eyes, sharp ears, and unsettling expressions. Life-sized bronze heads, delicate gold foils, jade blades, ivory tusks, and ritual vessels of extraordinary craftsmanship. Radiocarbon dating places these objects roughly between 1600 and 1200 BC during the Shang dynasty period. Yet stylistically, they seem to belong to a completely different cultural world. Mainstream archaeology identifies Sanxingdui as the center of the ancient Shu civilization, a regional Bronze Age culture mentioned only briefly in later historical texts. These records describe Shu as distant and powerful, but offer few details. The artifacts themselves suggest a society with advanced bronze casting techniques, comparable in technical ability to the Shang, yet visually and symbolically distinct. The large masks, some more than a meter wide, appear ceremonial rather than decorative. Their wide, protruding eyes may represent deities, ancestral spirits, or mythic beings, figures meant to see beyond the human world. What unsettles researchers is not only the artistry, but the absence of continuity. There is little evidence of gradual development leading to this style, and even less evidence of what followed. The artifacts appear suddenly in the archaeological record, fully formed, and then disappear just as abruptly. The pits themselves show signs of intentional destruction, bronzes shattered, ivory burned, objects carefully placed before burial. This suggests not an accident or invasion, but a controlled ritual, perhaps a final act. Why would a civilization dismantle and bury its most sacred objects? One prevailing theory links the abandonment of Sanxingdui to environmental change. Geological studies suggest that seismic activity may have altered river systems in the region, forcing the population to relocate. If the land that sustained Shu failed, ritual offerings may have been made to appease gods or mark the symbolic end of an era. Nearby, the later site of Jinsha shows cultural similarities, hinting that the people of Sanxingdui may not have vanished, but transformed. Other interpretations remain more speculative. The strikingly non-human appearance of the masks has inspired theories about lost knowledge, forgotten belief systems, or symbolic representations of beings no longer remembered. Were these faces gods, shamans in ceremonial regalia, or something more abstract, a visual language we no longer understand? The long ears, angular features, and penetrating gaze resist easy classification within known Chinese iconography of the time. There are also unanswered questions about influence. Did Sanxingdui develop in isolation, or was it part of a broader network of exchange now lost to time? The presence of ivory suggests long-distance trade, possibly reaching far beyond the Sichuan Basin. Yet no written language has been found to explain these connections, leaving interpretation entirely in the hands of material evidence. Recent excavations have uncovered additional pits, confirming that the original discoveries were not anomalies, but part of a much larger ritual landscape. Each new find deepens the mystery rather than resolving it. Sanxingdui does not fit neatly into established historical narratives. It challenges them. And so the site remains suspended between knowledge and uncertainty. A civilization capable of extraordinary skill, complex belief, and deliberate erasure. Was Sanxingdui ending something, or preserving it for the future? And if so, what message was meant to survive beneath the soil, waiting for the moment we were ready to ask the right questions? From the hidden chambers of ancient libraries to the dim light of modern archival rooms, some manuscripts carry a mystery that transcends centuries. Among these, the Voynich manuscript stands as perhaps the most enigmatic. Bound in vellum, its pages yellowed with age, the manuscript seems almost alive, each folio brimming with strange symbols, intricate illustrations, and text in a language no one can definitively read. Yet within this strange codex, the Zodiac pages stand out. Unlike the botanical or alchemical sections, these celestial charts are immediate and visceral. They invite the observer to trace the paths of stars, planets, and cosmic figures, all rendered in delicate ink and watercolor. The Zodiac pages are organized with care, each sign encircled by rows of nude, often ethereal, female figures, seemingly bathing in or interacting with fluid-like streams. Constellations and symbols frame the scenes, yet none match the familiar signs of Western astrology precisely. Researchers date the manuscript to the early 15th century, placing it somewhere in northern Italy or Central Europe. But beyond its physical origins, the Zodiac pages resist context. Who drew them? For what purpose? And why does the symbolism not correspond neatly to any known medieval astrological or cosmological systems? Mainstream scholars have offered several explanations. Some suggest the pages were part of a medical or herbal compendium, associating zodiacal signs with particular times for treatment or plant gathering. Others see them as an esoteric astrology guide, blending mystical thought with practical knowledge. The fluid, bathing figures might represent the flow of cosmic energy into the human body, or perhaps a symbolic mapping of health and disease onto the heavens. Yet, even these interpretations stumble when faced with the manuscript's language, an alphabet of undeciphered glyphs, sometimes repeated with patterns reminiscent of natural language, sometimes entirely alien. Despite centuries of cryptographic attempts, from amateur sleuths to modern AI analysis, no definitive translation exists. The artwork itself is equally perplexing. The figures are not merely symbolic, they possess a subtle humanity. They twist, gesture, and float within the circular confines of their respective zodiac signs. The colors are soft but deliberate. Ochres, greens, blues, and delicate reds that suggest careful selection rather than random choice. Some scholars have argued that the style is influenced by medieval European illumination. Others note parallels with Middle Eastern cosmology and imagery. Could these pages represent a fusion of cultures, a lost transmission of knowledge that bridged continents? Or were they meant to conceal, rather than reveal, their secrets? Beyond questions of origin, the Zodiac pages provoke reflection on intention. Were they educational, ritualistic, or artistic? Were they a sophisticated cipher, a private work of a single mind, or the product of a collaborative yet anonymous workshop? And why, if meant for practical use, does the text stubbornly refuse translation, as if it were intentionally obfuscated? The manuscript's binding, the slight burn marks on its edges, the uneven fading of ink, these are all traces of time's passage, yet they offer no answers to the riddles within. Speculative theories abound, as they do with all historical mysteries that resist conventional understanding. Some suggest a connection to forgotten astrological systems, perhaps ones that predate even European medieval thought. Others propose that the figures may depict a symbolic representation of human life and the cosmos, in which the Zodiac pages were meant to guide spiritual or mystical practice rather than map the stars empirically. A few fringe interpretations even hint at extraterrestrial or lost civilizations influencing the imagery, though evidence for these ideas remains circumstantial at best. Still, the precision and coherence of the artwork hint at intelligence and purpose, not random invention. The Zodiac pages are also a mirror, reflecting the limits of our understanding. Each time a scholar attempts to decode the glyphs or match the figures to historical constellations, new questions arise. Why are certain stars missing or rearranged? Why do some figures appear pregnant or engaged in activities that seem ritualistic rather than astronomical? Could these be allegories, an encoded calendar, or entirely symbolic representations of cycles of life, death, and rebirth? Each hypothesis brings its own assumptions, and yet none fully satisfies the enduring enigma. As we study the manuscript today, digital scans and high-resolution photography allow unprecedented access to details invisible to earlier generations. Tiny strokes of ink, faint underdrawings, and subtle corrections reveal a meticulous process, hinting at deliberate design. It is almost as if the creator, whoever they were, knew their work might survive long after its meaning was lost, trusting that future generations would marvel at it without necessarily deciphering it. The Zodiac pages, in particular, capture this tension between clarity and obscurity. They are both familiar and alien, comforting in their symmetry, yet disquieting in their unknowability. And so the Voynich Zodiac pages remain suspended in time, a testament to human creativity, precision, and mystery. They invite observation, analysis, and wonder. They compel us to ask not only what knowledge might have been lost, but what intentions, beliefs, and cultural perspectives have vanished with it. For every line of ink traced, every constellation mapped, the question lingers. Are we seeing the universe as the original author did? Or merely glimpsing a shadow of a vision we will never fully comprehend? What other secrets might lie in the folds of this manuscript, waiting for a mind capable of understanding them to finally awaken them from centuries of silence? Far out in the Pacific Ocean, isolated by thousands of kilometers of open water, lies the island of Rapa Nui, known more widely as Easter Island. Its rugged cliffs and volcanic cones rise sharply from the sea, while the interior slopes are dotted with stone platforms and the iconic moai statues, their massive heads and elongated torsos watching silently over the island. The moai are the most visible remnants of this distant civilization, but hidden among these monumental forms is a quieter, more cryptic legacy: the Rongorongo Tablets. These wooden tablets are small, often no larger than a sheet of paper, yet their surfaces are densely carved with lines of glyphs arranged in neat rows. Each glyph represents a figure, a shape, or a combination of lines and curves that seem at once familiar and utterly alien. They are not just inscriptions, they are encoded messages from a world largely lost to us, a language that refuses to yield its secrets despite decades of scholarly attention. Unlike the Voynich manuscript, which survives in a single codex, Rongorongo appears in multiple wooden artifacts scattered across museums and private collections. Yet all share a common enigma. No one has definitively deciphered them. The origins of Rongorongo are uncertain. Oral traditions suggest that it emerged after the arrival of Europeans in the 18th century, though some scholars argue that it predates contact, implying that the script was a development of Rapa Nui society itself. Carbon dating of the wooden tablets places many in the 18th and 19th centuries, yet the patterns and complexity of the glyphs hint at a system of writing that may have been in use for generations. What is clear is that the Rongorongo script was deliberate and complex. The carvings follow a unique boustrophodon pattern, with lines read alternately from left to right and right to left, requiring the reader to rotate the tablet with each new row, a design that implies both sophistication and ritual care. Mainstream interpretations suggest Rongorongo may have been used for genealogical records, religious ceremonies, or astronomical calculations. Some glyphs resemble natural forms, plants, animals, or human figures, while others are abstract or geometrical, perhaps symbolic representations of events or ideas. Yet, attempts to link Rongorongo to known Polynesian languages or writing systems have been inconclusive. Unlike the visible moai, whose significance can be interpreted through oral tradition and archaeological context, the Rongorongo tablets speak in a code that has resisted translation. What knowledge did these carvings preserve? Were they practical records, sacred incantations, or mnemonic devices meant to guide memory and ritual? The circumstances surrounding the loss of Rongorongo knowledge deepen its mystery. The arrival of Europeans brought disease, slavery, and societal collapse to Rapa Nui, decimating the population. By the mid-19th century, the ability to read the glyphs had largely disappeared. What was once a living system of communication became an artifact of memory, its purpose obscured by the turmoil of history. Even today, fragments of tablets survive, but without native readers, the language is a silent echo of an erased culture. Speculative theories have emerged alongside scholarly work. Some researchers suggest the glyphs encode a calendar system, mapping celestial cycles or marking seasonal changes vital to an isolated island society. Others propose that they are ritual texts, possibly tied to the construction of the moai or the performance of ceremonies in their presence. A few interpretations even draw parallels with distant writing systems, hinting at cross-cultural influence or convergent development, though these ideas remain tentative. More fringe theories, as with many lost scripts, flirt with notions of advanced, forgotten knowledge, but the most compelling evidence remains grounded in the physical and cultural reality of Rapa Nui itself, a society forced into adaptation, survival, and secrecy by the harsh isolation of the Pacific. The artistry of Rongorongo is itself remarkable. The glyphs are carved with precision, despite the tools available at the time, and the tablets show careful attention to proportion, alignment, and symmetry. Some glyphs repeat across tablets, suggesting a standardized system, while others appear unique, perhaps capturing local or ceremonial knowledge. Unlike simple decorative motifs, these carvings convey intentionality. They are messages encoded in wood, waiting for a reader who can still unlock their meaning. The act of carving may have been ritual in itself, a meditation on knowledge, ancestry, or cosmic order. What strikes the modern observer most profoundly is the sense of continuity and absence. The Rongorongo tablets hint at a civilization capable of complex abstraction, yet so much of their culture remains lost. The moai stand, the volcanic cones endure, the land itself holds traces of human habitation, but the words that might explain beliefs, laws, or history have slipped beyond comprehension. In this sense, Rongorongo is not merely a script. It is a portal into a vanished cognitive world, a reflection of a society that once charted knowledge through shapes and symbols rather than phonetics. And yet, for all its mystery, Rongorongo offers a quiet invitation. Each glyph, each line, is a reminder of the limits of human understanding and the possibilities that lie just beyond them. Could future advances in linguistics, computational analysis, or comparative anthropology finally reveal its secrets? Or will the tablets remain, as they have for centuries, a testament to knowledge deliberately preserved and lost in equal measure? Perhaps the greatest lesson of Rongorongo is the humility it imposes on any who study it, that history does not always yield to curiosity, and that some truths may only exist as questions, waiting silently on the edges of our understanding. In the shadow of the Moai, amidst the windswept plains and volcanic ridges of Rapa Nui, the Rongorongo tablets endure, enigmatic, silent, and profoundly human. They remind us that civilization is not only measured in stone or conquest, but also in the fragile traces of memory, imagination, and intellect, carefully etched in wood and carried across time. And as we continue to study them, turning each tablet, tracing each line, we are left to wonder, what other knowledge lies encoded in symbols we have yet to comprehend, and what stories of human ingenuity remain hidden in the quiet corners of the past? High on the sun-baked hills of southern Crete, near the ruins of the ancient city of Phaistos, archaeologists uncovered an artifact unlike anything they had seen before. In 1908, during excavations of the Minoan Palace complex, a circular clay disc emerged from the depths of a storage room. Its surface was impressed with a spiral of stamped symbols, carefully arranged in rows that curl from the edge to the center. This is the Phaistos Disc, a compact, enigmatic relic that has defied understanding for over a century. Unlike tablets or codices, the disc is one object, a single artifact whose purpose and meaning remain wholly uncertain. The disc measures just over 15 centimeters in diameter, yet every detail conveys intentionality. Each impression appears to have been made with a stamp, the symbols repeated with precision, suggesting the use of a pre-designed set of tools. The images depict human figures, animals, plants, and abstract shapes, each distinct yet rhythmically ordered within the spiral. Unlike the scripts of ancient Mesopotamia or Egypt, these symbols do not resemble any known writing system, and yet the regularity of their arrangement hints at meaning, a language, a message, or perhaps a ritual code waiting to be understood. Scholars date the Phaistos Disc to roughly 1700 BC, placing it firmly within the height of Minoan civilization. The Minoans, famed for their palaces, frescoes, and maritime prowess, left behind rich archaeological records, yet the disc stands apart. It is the only object of its kind. No other Minoan artifacts display this method of symbol stamping or spiral arrangement. Was it a prototype of a wider system that never survived, or a unique creation for a specific, perhaps ceremonial, purpose? Mainstream explanations have proposed several possibilities. Some suggest the disc could be an early form of writing, encoding a prayer, a hymn, or an administrative record. Others see it as a calendar or astronomical guide, noting the rhythms of the lunar and solar cycles. Yet every attempt to link the disc to Linear A, the known Minoan script, encounters difficulties. The symbols on the disc are visually distinct, and the syntax, if there is one, remains inscrutable. The disc may represent a parallel system of communication, a regional dialect, or even a symbolic language rather than a fully phonetic script. The method of creation alone is remarkable. Archaeologists note that the impressions appear deliberately and uniformly pressed into soft clay before firing. This technique, which involves pressing preformed stamps into the surface rather than inscribing by hand, represents a significant technological and conceptual advance. It raises questions about the dissemination of ideas. Was this intended as a single sacred object or as a prototype for mass reproduction? Yet no duplicates have ever been found, making the disc a singular window into a lost intellectual world. Speculative interpretations extend further. Some researchers propose the Phaistos Disc could encode a ritual liturgy or even a song, with each symbol representing syllables or musical notes. Others consider astronomical possibilities, linking the spiral to cyclical phenomena such as lunar months or stellar positions. A few theories flirt with cross-cultural connections, comparing the disc to scripts in Anatolia, Egypt, or even the distant Aegean Islands, though these links remain tenuous. What seems certain is that the disc was deliberately designed for someone who understood its meaning, a community or individual for whom the patterns and symbols carried significance now lost to time. The disc's discovery context adds to its mystique. Found in the ruins of a palace room filled with everyday items, pottery, tools, and storage vessels, it is both ordinary and extraordinary. It was not buried as a sacred object in a tomb, nor hidden in a secret chamber. Yet its uniqueness suggests that, even among the Minoans, it held a special status. The spiral pattern itself evokes a sense of movement, perhaps symbolizing cycles of life, time, or spiritual journey. It is as if the disc was intended to be both read and contemplated, experienced visually and intellectually at once. The singularity of the Phaistos Disc raises profound questions about communication and memory in ancient societies. Did the Minoans possess other forms of knowledge that left no trace? Were there libraries or archives that perished with the cataclysms that eventually reshaped Crete? And if this disc represents one method of recording thought, what was lost when that method was abandoned or forgotten? Like Rongorongo on Rapa Nui, or the Zodiac pages of the Voynich manuscript, the Phaistos Disc serves as a reminder that civilizations often leave behind tantalizing hints of their intellectual and spiritual lives, even when the bulk of their knowledge vanishes. Modern technology has renewed attempts to understand the disc. High-resolution imaging, computational analysis, and even artificial intelligence have been applied to pattern recognition and linguistic hypothesis testing. Yet, after more than a century, the spiral of stamped symbols continues to resist definitive interpretation. Each line of symbols, each carefully impressed figure, remains a challenge, a puzzle encoded in clay that has endured the millennia. The Phaistos Disc asks questions rather than provides answers. Was it a practical tool, a religious talisman, or a work of art with meaning only known to its creator? Could it represent an unknown system of writing that never flourished, or a unique ceremonial artifact? And perhaps most poignantly, what other expressions of Minoan thought have been lost, leaving us with glimpses rather than explanations? In its quiet, circular form, the disc invites reflection on the fragility of human knowledge and the enduring allure of mystery. As we consider the Phaistos Disc, spinning our eyes along its spiral of symbols, we are reminded of a larger truth about history's secrets. For every artifact recovered, there are countless stories that remain buried, their meanings obscured by time. The disc endures not simply as a relic of the past, but as a testament to human ingenuity, imagination, and the enduring quest to capture thought in tangible form. It challenges us to recognize both the limits of what we know and the possibilities of what might yet be discovered, and it leaves a lingering question in the mind of every observer. What other mysteries are waiting to emerge from the shadows of civilization, silently awaiting the curious eye that might finally understand them? Following the spirals of symbols on the Phaistos Disc, we now turn our attention from ancient enigmas of communication to a very different kind of historical puzzle, one rooted not in language but in early scientific thought. Not far from the Carpathian foothills, hidden among the archives of a Transylvanian city, scholars uncovered a manuscript whose contents challenge our expectations about the history of technology and human ingenuity. In 1961, a Romanian scientist named Doru Todoriciu made an extraordinary discovery in the libraries of Sibiu, a hefty leather-bound volume of some 450 pages written in archaic German. The manuscript, now known simply as the Sibiu Manuscript, is dated to 1570, placing it squarely in the heart of the Renaissance, a period of renewed learning across Europe. What drew immediate attention were its dense technical diagrams and descriptions not of theology or classical philosophy, but of mechanisms that resemble rocketry and ballistic science. At first glance, the manuscript resembles a treatise on artillery and the physics of motion. Sketches fill the margins and pages, each accompanied by annotations describing structural components and stages of propulsion. The text sets out, in painstaking detail, theories and methods for building devices that resemble multi-stage rockets, machines with sequential chambers of fuel designed to propel a payload higher and farther than was achievable with simple black powder projectiles. These concepts are familiar to us now, central to space exploration in the modern era, but to find them outlined in the 16th century was startling. Mainstream historians acknowledge that primitive rockets, essentially enhanced fireworks and military rockets, were known long before this time. Fireworks had spread from China to Europe in the Middle Ages, and simple black powder rockets were used in battle and celebration alike. Yet the Sibiu manuscript goes further. It appears to articulate principles of multi-stage propulsion, a concept not widely credited in technological development until centuries later. Embedded among the technical sketches are diagrams for stabilizing fins, staged combustion sequences, and even comments on the nature of fuel mixtures. Notes that echo modern rocket design more than medieval gunnery manuals. The attribution of the manuscript compound adds to its mystery. Many researchers link it to Conrad Haas, an engineer and military specialist born in 1509, who served as a master of the Sibiu arsenal. Whether Haas was indeed its author remains unresolved, but the intellectual depth and scientific orientation of the text suggest a mind steeped in practical mechanics and experimental theory. Gustav Haas's background in the military sciences would have positioned him to think deeply about propulsion, ballistics, and the emerging technologies of his age. Yet even within the manuscript itself, there are gaps and ambiguities. There is no direct evidence that the designs were tested in the field, and no contemporary accounts outside the manuscript describe operational experiments. Some commentators report that pages refer to a demonstration in Sibiu in 1555, an event said to have drawn large crowds to witness a flying spear or early rocket launch. But corroborating documentation from the period is lacking, and the claim remains speculative. The contents of the Sibiu manuscript have sparked debate across disciplines. Traditional historians question how advanced theoretical rocketry could have been articulated without broader technological support systems. Materials, science, metallurgy, and chemical refinement that only matured in later centuries. Engineers point out that even if conceptual frameworks existed, the physical realities of constructing multi-stage propulsion systems in the 1500s would have been formidable. These technologies require precise control of combustion, reliable containment, and an understanding of aerodynamics that most historians believe wasn't fully codified until the 20th century. Speculative voices have seized on the manuscript's unusual contents, proposing that the text might hint at lost traditions of scientific knowledge or forgotten lines of inquiry interrupted by war, plague, and political upheaval. Could there have been an early community of experimenters whose work never entered the formal historical record? Was the manuscript a private compendium, a workshop notebook, or a speculative exercise in pushing the boundaries of what was conceivable? Or are we simply seeing an early attempt to synthesize existing rocket technology into a more systematic framework, later forgotten as scientific paradigms shifted? The broader context is also fascinating. The year 1570 sits well before the scientific revolution that would later flourish with the work of Galileo and Newton. In this transitional era, Europe's intellectual landscape was dotted with polymaths who experimented across disciplines, blending empirical observation with theoretical speculation. The Sibiu manuscript may reflect one such mind at work, a thinker attempting to capture the dynamics of motion and force as they saw them, using the conceptual tools available at the time. What we know for certain is modest. This manuscript exists, and it contains detailed mechanical drawings paired with technical exposition that was, at the time, far from mainstream knowledge. It was published in the 1960s and has since invited scholars, engineers, and enthusiasts alike to reassess assumptions about the origins of rocketry and propulsion science. Yet, as with other historical puzzles we have explored, whether the undeciphered glyphs of Rongorongo or the spiraling symbols of the Phaistos Disc, the Sibiu Manuscript raises as many questions as it answers. Does it represent a remarkable outlier in the history of science, a document ahead of its time? Or is it better understood within the context of 16th century mechanical experimentation, remarkable but not anomalous? Most intriguingly, what other texts from this era might lie hidden, waiting to reshape our understanding of how knowledge evolved? Each page of the Sibiu manuscript invites us to wonder not just about the past, but about the myriad paths human innovation might have taken, and the stories of discovery still waiting to be told. Flowing from our journey through ancient technologies and hidden codices, we now turn our attention to a carved stone wheel nestled deep within the ruins of one of South Asia's oldest cities, a mysterious creation that has puzzled scholars, locals, and curious visitors alike for more than a century. In the sprawling archaeological landscape of Anuradhapura, Sri Lanka, there is a quiet corner of Ranmasu Uyana, the ancient Golden Fish Park, where lush greenery meets stone-cut ruins and placid reservoirs. Along one low rock face, intertwined with shadows and sunlight, is a large circular carving etched directly into the granite, Sakwala Chakraya, the universe cycle. At roughly 1.8 meters in diameter, its shallow grooves and symbols are not immediately striking like colossal statues or soaring temples, yet their careful design beckons observers to pause and contemplate. The first scholarly recognition of this carved circle came in the early 20th century through the work of British archaeologist H.C.P. Bell, who documented it in the annual reports of the Archaeological Survey of Ceylon. Bell described the intricate arrangement of concentric rings, intersecting lines, and geometric forms, noting that they seemed unlike other carvings from the region in both style and possible purpose. Upon close inspection, the pattern reveals a large central circle made up of 7 concentric rings enclosed within a square, intersected by perpendicular lines that divide the design into quadrants and vertical slices. Outside this core, a decorative band depicts aquatic life, fish, turtles, and other marine forms, circling the outer edge. Within the inner fields, small circles, umbrella-like shapes, and abstract figures fill the divided partitions, creating a composition that is both ordered and enigmatic. Despite its clear craftsmanship, the age and purpose of Sakwala Chakraya remain unresolved. Unlike many of the stupas, monasteries, and rock carvings of Anuradhapura, which are referenced in chronicles and inscriptions dating back as far as 250 BC, no historical record mentions the carving or its creator. This absence presents a fundamental problem for archaeologists. Without context, the intent behind the design is difficult to reconstruct. Mainstream archaeologists generally consider the carving as a cosmographical chart, a tangible expression of how the ancient inhabitants of this region perceived the universe. Some early interpretations align it with Buddhist cosmology, possibly representing Mount Meru at the center of existence, encircled by seas and inhabited realms. The marine motifs and geometric orientation could reflect a symbolic view of the world rather than a literal map of stars or planets, fitting with broader philosophical traditions of ancient South Asian thought. Yet even this explanation lacks conclusive evidence. The iconography does not closely mirror other known religious art from the Anuradhapura period, which often features typical Buddhist symbols like lotus flowers, swans, and narrative reliefs. Instead, the chart's components appear abstract and unique, prompting serious questions about its intended meaning. Beyond academic circles, more speculative interpretations have arisen, some suggesting the carving may have been a blueprint or planning diagram, perhaps used in architectural or irrigation design given its proximity to engineered waterways and reservoirs. The presence of 4 stone-carved seats facing the diagram has led some scholars to hypothesize that the site could have served as a place of discussion or instruction, where astronomers, architects, or philosophers gathered to study or debate cosmic and earthly matters. In the realm of fringe theories, the Sakwala Chakraya has taken on almost mythological significance. Enthusiasts of ancient mysteries have dubbed it Sri Lanka's Stargate, suggesting the diagram could represent a portal to the cosmos or a code for accessing hidden dimensions. While there is no credible evidence to support such claims, their very existence highlights how enigmatic the carving feels to modern observers, a design open enough to invite adventurous interpretation, yet resistant to confident explanation. Some have even drawn parallels, however tenuous, between Sakwala Chakraya and other circular carvings or diagrams found around the world, such as the enigmatic geoglyphs of the Nazca Desert or rock wheels in the Andes. Whether these comparisons hint at distant cultural connections or merely reflect human fascination with circles and cosmology is unclear, but they underscore a universal impulse to inscribe meaning onto the natural world. Importantly, the lack of definitive dating complicates any firm conclusion about the chart's origin. While Ranmasu Uyana itself flourished during the early centuries of the Common Era, especially in the 7th to 8th centuries when new buildings were added to the garden complex, the exact period when Sakwala Chakraya was carved remains undocumented. Without inscriptions or corroborating texts, its chronology may forever be approximate at best. In light of these unknowns, the Sakwala Chakraya stands not as a solved puzzle, but as an invitation to explore the limits of ancient knowledge. Was it a cosmological map rooted in Buddhist philosophy? A teaching aid for discussions of astronomy and space? An architectural plan? Or something else entirely, something we have yet to imagine? The enigmatic patterns carved into that ancient rock remind us that the past is not a static archive, but a living mystery. And as we gaze upon it today, we are left to wonder, what secrets did its creators hope to convey, and what else might be hidden in plain sight among the ruins of ancient civilizations? The Codex Rohonczi is a modest-sized book, just over a dozen centimeters tall, its leather cover worn thin by time. Open it and you find 448 tightly packed pages filled with strange, flowing rows of undeciphered characters, glyphs unlike any known alphabet. Alongside this endless string of signs are 87 illustrations depicting religious figures, battle scenes, and symbolic motifs that seem to blend Christian, pagan, and Islamic imagery into a tapestry without obvious narrative. The manuscript emerged into the light of scholarship unexpectedly in the early 19th century, when a Hungarian nobleman, Gustav Batthyány, donated his vast library, including this peculiar codex, to the Hungarian Academy of Sciences. It was named after Rohonc, the town where it had been kept, today known as Recknitz in Austria. Yet before that moment, almost nothing is reliably known about its earlier life. There are tantalizing mentions in old library catalogs that may refer to it, but no solid provenance exists before the 1700s. The most immediate mystery of the codex is its script, roughly 10 times the size of a typical alphabet, with hundreds of different characters appearing across its folios. These signs repeat in patterns that suggest structure and intentionality, yet they map onto no known language or writing system. Some scholars have speculated that the symbols might represent syllables or concepts, much as Chinese characters do, but even this comparison falls short of a clear linguistic framework. Close inspection of the manuscript reveals curious inconsistencies in its layout. The texts appear to have been written in directions that change. Some lines seem to run from right to left, others in different orientations. This has led researchers to wonder whether the Codex preserves a script that followed rules unfamiliar to us, or whether those irregularities are a clue to how the text was encoded or constructed. Most mainstream historians remain cautious. Many consider the Codex potentially a 16th century artifact, based on the Venetian paper on which it is written, which tests suggest dates from around the 1530s. Whether the manuscript records authentic historical memory or something else entirely is still unresolved. Attempts to decode the text stretch back to the 19th century. Early scholars such as Ferenc Toldi, Paul Hunfalvi, and Albert Mall examined the manuscript without success. In the late 20th century, Hungarian researchers undertook more focused linguistic and statistical analyses, searching for patterns that might reveal structure, syntax, or meaning, but no consensus emerged. The Codex's writing resists every traditional approach to decipherment. The illustrations add further layers to the mystery. The scenes range from figures in long robes to mounted warriors and ritualistic gestures, often set against architectural backdrops that resemble churches or fortified towns. Christian crosses appear beside crescent moons and sun-like symbols, suggesting a world where different religious traditions intersected in some form. Yet these visuals, while evocative, do not unravel the text. They raise questions more than they answer. Were they meant to guide the reader, supplement narrative, or mask meaning behind allegory? Over the years, various theories have been proposed about the manuscript's purpose. Some suggest it may be a religious codex, capturing prayers, liturgical texts, or records of syncretic belief systems. Others argue it might be a historical chronicle of a culture or community yet unidentified. There are even ideas that it could be an encoded cipher, a text deliberately obscured to conceal its meaning from all but a privileged few. More speculative interpretations touch on linguistic fringe theories, proposing links to early Hungarian runes, Dacian or early Romanian dialects, or even distant script traditions. None of these hypotheses have gained widespread acceptance, partly because the manuscript's structure and imagery resist comparison with known languages or documented writing systems. A counterpoint to interpretations of authentic mystery is the suggestion that the manuscript might be a hoax. Some Hungarian scholars, drawing on the Codex's undecipherability, the absence of clear historical context, and irregularities in style and form, have argued that it could be an elaborate forgery, an artifact designed to deceive or to mimic lost wisdom. Yet, despite these claims, no definitive evidence has ever surfaced to confirm intentional fabrication, nor to fully dismiss the Codex as either artifice or artifact. In recent years, digital tools and computational analyses have been applied to the Codex's text, mapping frequency patterns and structural distributions in ways not possible a century ago. These methods confirm the persistence of regularities, patterns that suggest more than randomness, but they have not translated into clear understanding. It remains unclear whether the Codex encodes a real language, a constructed system, or something that defies classification altogether. The Codex Rohonczi shares a whispery kinship with other historical enigmas. Its pages, like those of the Voynich manuscript or Rongorongo inscriptions, hold signs of human intention and cultural expression, yet their inner logic has slipped beyond reliable interpretation. It sits somewhere between cryptic message and silent testament, its symbols lingering like echoing footsteps in an abandoned hall. And so we return to the same profound question that drives our exploration of history's greatest secrets. What can we learn from a document that refuses to speak clearly? Does its elusiveness suggest lost knowledge, encoded wisdom, or simply the limits of our interpretive tools? As scholars continue to probe its depths, the Codex Rohonczi remains an open invitation, an unwritten story waiting for the right key, or perhaps a question that history itself will never fully answer. Flowing from the inscrutable symbols of ancient texts to a different kind of human and architectural mystery, We descend now from the light of day into a labyrinth carved beneath the earth itself. In the heart of central Turkey's Cappadocia region, just beyond the gentle curves of vineyards and sun-baked hills, lies a secret world that for centuries was forgotten by history and only revealed by accident. This is Derinkuyu Underground City, an extraordinary subterranean refuge that challenges our sense of scale, ingenuity, and survival. At first glance, Derinkuyu seems almost unreal. Beneath a modest Anatolian town in Nevşehir province, a network of tunnels plunges deep into the volcanic rock, burrowing more than 85 meters below the surface and expanding into a multi-layered city of chambers, corridors, and hidden recesses. This is not a cave network, but a deliberately engineered settlement with spaces carved for everyday life. Kitchens, sleeping quarters, wine presses, cellars, water wells, stables for livestock, and even chapels for worship. The rediscovery of Derinkuyu in 1963 is almost as mysterious as the city itself. A local resident, renovating his home, chanced upon a narrow passage behind a wall, a gap that few would have noticed. When he explored further, that small opening led into a dark tunnel that unwound into an astonishing array of chambers and halls. Behind his basement wall was a forgotten city, hidden for centuries beneath the soil. Derinkuyu's size defies expectation. At its peak, the settlement could shelter as many as 20,000 people, alongside their animals and food supplies, for extended periods. Its depth and scale place it among the largest known underground cities in the world, and certainly the most extensive in Cappadocia. How and why such a metropolis was constructed remains a question woven with both historical insight and thoughtful speculation. The soft volcanic tuff that underlies the region was both a challenge and an opportunity, malleable enough to be carved with hand tools, yet firm enough to support vast caverns without collapse. This geological gift allowed ancient builders to expand downward, layer by layer, into a seemingly endless underground world. Archaeologists generally agree that Derinkuyu's earliest chambers were hollowed out long ago, perhaps as early as the 8th to 7th centuries BC, by Phrygian settlers seeking simple shelter within the pliable rock. Over the centuries, successive cultures, Persians, Greeks, and later Christian communities, continued to reshape and enlarge the complex, adding inscriptions, chapels, and new living spaces as the demands of history pressed their needs deeper into the earth. One of the city's most remarkable features is its ventilation system. Dozens of shafts, some more than 55 meters deep, bring air into the labyrinthine depths, a silent testament to the builder's remarkable understanding of subterranean life. In a place sealed away from the sun, fresh air and clean water were essential, and Derinkuyu's planners engineered intricate wells and ducts that ensured survival during extended stays underground. Yet it was not merely infrastructure that made Derinkuyu functional, it was strategy. The tunnels are narrow and winding, designed to funnel intruders into single file. Massive stone doors, resembling millstones and weighing hundreds of kilograms, were fitted at key junctions, capable of rolling closed from within to isolate floors or entire wings of the city. Such defenses suggest repeated need, not for convenience, but for survival. In the Byzantine era, when the city was at its height, these design choices may have been a response to Arab-Byzantine wars and other regional conflicts that defined the 8th to 12th centuries. Christian inhabitants could retreat below ground during raids, maintaining their faith and community in secret chambers lit by oil lamps and echoing with hymn and prayer. Yet despite these well-documented phases of expansion and use, much about Derinkuyu remains unclear. The original builders and the precise timeline of construction are subjects of ongoing debate. Some argue that the earliest levels could predate the commonly accepted Phrygian era, pointing to the extraordinary depth and complexity as evidence of multiple, overlapping phases of construction, perhaps beginning in pre-classical times. Others suspect that the true origins may be lost forever to the simple fact that subterranean architecture leaves fewer datable clues than its surface counterparts. The interplay of practical purpose and existential threat is woven throughout the underground city. Below ground, life was communal and cooperative, oriented around survival: food stores and animal pens, quiet classrooms, hidden chapels, and shared hearths. How did families maintain daily routines in such claustrophobic environs? How did time itself feel different in an underground world where light came only from lamps, and days were measured by shifting air currents and the rhythm of meals? Derinkuyu's spaces speak to more than refuge. They suggest adaptation to another kind of existence. Modern exploration reveals only a fragment of what the city might encompass. Roughly 10% of the network is accessible to visitors, with countless passages still unexcavated or closed for safety. Historians and archaeologists believe that Derinkuyu is interconnected with nearby subterranean settlements, such as Kaimaklu, by tunnels stretching kilometers beneath the surface. If true, this hints at an even larger interlinked system of subterranean refuge cities, a hidden civilization sprawling under Cappadocia's hills. And so we find ourselves peering into the dark corridors of Derinkuyu not just as archaeologists or tourists, but as witnesses to human ingenuity under pressure. Why did entire communities choose, or need, to bury their lives underground? What fears, what dangers drove them below the warming sun into depths where silence and stone reigned? And what remains beyond the reach of our shovels and flashlights, still waiting in the shadows to be discovered? Derinkuyu challenges us to consider not only the history of refuge, but the resilience of the human spirit, and to wonder, how deep does civilization's hidden past truly go? Flowing from the hidden cities carved into the earth, where silence and strategy shaped lives unseen, we now turn to a different kind of puzzle, one carved in stone above ground, where art, text, and intentional mystery converge. In the gentle, rolling landscape of Staffordshire, England, at the historic estate of Shugborough Hall, stands a monument that for nearly 3 centuries has captivated visitors and baffled scholars alike. Below a classical relief lies a sequence of letters whose meaning remains as elusive today as when it was first carved. The Shepherd's Monument, nestled among the estate's gardens and follies, presents an elegant facade, a stone arch framing a relief inspired by Nicolas Poussin's 17th century painting, The Shepherds of Arcadia. In that painting, idealized figures in pastoral dress surround a tomb inscribed with the Latin phrase, Et in Arcadia ego, a contemplation on life, death, and the ever-present shadow of mortality. In the version at Shugborough, that image is rendered as a mirror reflection, an uncanny echo that invites deeper contemplation. Beneath this relief, carved into the stone, lies the mystery at the heart of the site, a string of 8 letters, OUOSVAVV, flanked and framed by 2 additional characters, D and M. No inscription in book, archive, or cryptographic catalog has definitively unlocked their purpose. Over centuries, this sequence has earned recognition as one of the most enigmatic, undeciphered inscriptions in the world. At first glance, the letters seem random, a baffling cipher without pattern or context. Yet they were clearly placed with care. The position of the inscription on a commissioned monument crafted by Flemish sculptor Peter Scheemakers in the mid-18th century suggests intention, not accident. The DM flanking the mysterious sequence may echo the Roman funerary inscription Dis Manibus, meaning dedicated to the shades, hinting at a memorial context. Yet this only deepens the question. Did the rest of the letters carry a coded message, or are they something else entirely? For over 250 years, the puzzle has invited interpretations that span from the scholarly to the speculative. Some of the greatest minds of the 19th century, including authors and thinkers like Charles Dickens and Charles Darwin, are said to have pondered the inscription without reaching consensus. Modern linguists and cryptanalysts have likewise attempted to decipher the code, but no proposal has gained universal acceptance. One line of explanation treats the letters as an acrostic, an abbreviation where each letter stands for the first letter of a word in a phrase. For example, a Latin rendering suggested by some interpreters offers a devotional sentiment, translated loosely as, "I pray that all may follow the way to true life." This theory connects the cryptic sequence to Christian symbolism and the broader themes of death and resurrection echoed in the relief above. Yet even this idea remains debated, with scholars noting that the connection to Latin funerary inscriptions is plausible but not definitive. Another interpretation sees the letters as an initialism in English, perhaps a poetically constructed line. "Out your own sweet veil, Alicia vanishes vanity," or other similar constructions conjectured over the years. These readings often hinge on speculative assemblies of words that fit the available letters, invoking landscape, love, or philosophical reflection. However elegant such constructions may appear, no documentary evidence ties them to the original makers of the monument. More adventurous theories weave the Shugborough inscription into wider narratives of esoteric orders, mythic quests, and hidden relics. In the late 20th century, writers exploring themes of secret societies tied the monument to the lore of the Priory of Sion and the search for the Holy Grail, suggesting that the code might be a clue pointing to lost treasures or sacred knowledge. While these ideas have captured popular imagination, especially after the success of novels and documentaries that reframe historical art as cryptic evidence, there is no historical record to link the monument or its inscription to any such orders. Other theories, informed by deep dives into archive annotations, genealogies of the Anson family, and estate records, propose that the letters may be tied to personal names or locations meaningful to the family who commissioned the monument. Some researchers have noted that combinations of initials could reference places or people associated with the estate in the 18th and early 19th centuries, making the inscription a kind of private code whose logic was known only to its creators. But again, this remains conjectural. What is striking about the Shugborough inscription is not only its resistance to decoding, but the way it has inspired successive generations to ask deeper questions about art, meaning, and human intent. The Et in Arcadia Ego relief above speaks to the transient nature of life, and perhaps the letters below extend that meditation into another dimension. A reminder that not all messages are meant to be spoken plainly, and not all knowledge is easily grasped. At the site today, visitors often linger before this modest stone panel, tracing the curves of the letters with their eyes and wondering about the hands that carved them. Are they a secret message of faith, a tribute to lost love, a private joke left by an eccentric patron, or a deliberate enigma designed to draw curiosity across centuries? Some scholars caution that the inscription might simply be a cryptographic puzzle with no deeper significance beyond artistic flourish, a testament to a time when classical learning and coded language intersected in the gardens of England's gentry. And so the Shugborough inscription persists as an open question. In a world where many mysteries are solved through painstaking scholarship and new technology, this string of letters remains stubbornly resistant. It stands not as a failure of interpretation, but as an invitation to look more closely at the spaces between art and language, history and imagination, surface and symbol. What did the creators intend? And why even now does their message remain just out of reach? That question still lingers, a cipher waiting for the mind capable of unraveling it. As we emerge from the shadowed passageways of Derinkuyu, carved by human hands into the depths of the earth. We now turn our gaze back above ground to another artifact of ancient ingenuity whose purpose remains as elusive as those subterranean corridors. Scattered across fields and buried beneath layers of northern European soil lie tiny geometric enigmas from the Roman world. Roman dodecahedrons, hollow metal objects whose form is unmistakable but whose meaning defies explanation. Imagine holding one in your hand, a smooth, hollow shape with 12 flat faces, each face pierced by a perfectly circular hole of differing diameter, the whole pierced by the air and light that once illuminated a distant era. At each of the 20 corners, a small rounded knob protrudes like a decorative crown. Their surfaces are free of inscriptions, free of text or numbering, and yet their design is deliberate, crafted with precision in copper alloy, likely bronze, sometime between the 2nd and 4th centuries A.D. Since the first such object was brought to scholarly attention in 1739, more than 100 examples have been unearthed across northern Europe, from what is now France and Germany to Britain and Belgium, but curiously, none have been found in Italy itself, the heartland of the Roman Empire. This geographic pattern has led many researchers to refer to them as Gallo-Roman dodecahedrons, reflecting their prominence in regions once lived by Celtic peoples under Roman rule. Despite centuries of study, not a single description of these objects appears in surviving Roman literature, and no images or texts have been found that explain their purpose. They are absent from scrolls, absent from mosaics, and absent from inventories, leaving the modern scholar with form but little historical context. Their very ubiquity in some areas, and simultaneous absence in others, presents the first layer of intrigue. Were they crafted for a practical purpose, a tool employed in daily life or in specialized work? Some early antiquarians speculated they might have served as weapons or as parts of military equipment, but their lightness and ornate construction make them impractical for combat. Others have suggested they could have been measuring devices or instruments for surveying, perhaps used by engineers or builders to calculate angles or distances. But the variation in their sizes and shapes and the lack of standardization undermines this explanation. In the absence of written reinforcement, alternative ideas have taken shape in the minds of both scholars and enthusiasts. Some suggest the dodecahedrons might have been tools of divination, used in rituals to consult the future or interpret omens, especially in regions where Celtic and Roman spiritual practices intersected. The presence of at least one fragment showing deliberate breakage hints that sometimes these objects may have been ritually destroyed, a practice known in other ancient cultures to mark the completion of a spiritual act. The suggestion of ritualistic or magical use gains support from the contexts in which dodecahedrons are sometimes found, not only in fields or hoards, but occasionally in burial settings, alongside other carefully chosen grave goods. This pattern has led some archaeologists to consider that they might have functioned as amulets or talismans, symbolic objects placed with the deceased as guides or protectors for the journey beyond life. Yet not all interpretations drift into the mystical. Some more speculative but still thoughtful theories suggest that the varying hole sizes could relate to textile work, perhaps as gauges for creating fibers or fabrics, or even as devices connected to crafts like glove making. While intriguing, this idea is hampered by the absence of wear on most preserved examples. If these were tools, one would expect signs of repeated use. Archival and archaeological evidence also suggests that these dodecahedrons were not everyday objects. Their careful manufacture in metal, sometimes showing detailed surface decoration, implies they were valued items, perhaps denoting status or symbolic affiliation. In some hoards, they appear alongside coins and other precious items, hinting that owners may have considered them valuable, either materially or symbolically. A particularly intriguing angle emerges when we consider the shape itself. In the philosophical traditions of Plato and the followers of Pythagoras, geometric solids were imbued with symbolic meaning. The dodecahedron was associated with the cosmos, a shape representing the entirety of the universe. Some scholars have posited that Roman dodecahedrons could have served as symbolic representations of universal order, perhaps used in philosophical or religious contexts to embody cosmic harmony or divine architecture. But here, as with so many theories, we encounter the essential challenge. There is no direct evidence to anchor these ideas firmly in the ancient world. Without textual descriptions or depictions in art, we are left to infer purpose from shape, context, and distribution. Unlike instruments whose usage leaves wear patterns or inscribed instructions, the dodecahedrons sit silent, their holes unmarked by repeated handling, awaiting interpretation. The ongoing discoveries continue to deepen the mystery rather than resolve it. In recent years, archaeologists have documented dodecahedrons in situ, that is, in their original archaeological layers, offering glimpses of the environments in which they were once used. Still, the absence of clear association with specific activities, buildings, or inscriptions has kept their true purpose just out of reach. Yet perhaps that is part of their enduring power as artifacts of history. Roman dodecahedrons remind us that even in a civilization as extensively documented as Rome's, there are still corners of the past shrouded in ambiguity. They prompt us to ask not just, what were they used for, but why did people make things whose meaning they chose not to record? Was this secrecy intentional, or has time simply eroded the records that once explained them? As we contemplate these 12-faced enigmas, rotating them in our minds as one might rotate their physical form, we are invited to acknowledge the limits of our knowledge and the possibilities that lie beyond it. Perhaps future excavations will uncover context that finally illuminates their role. Or perhaps these objects will continue to whisper their secrets only to those willing to listen deeply, letting the mystery itself be a part of the story. What might they tell us about the people who made and cherished them, if only we knew how to ask the right questions? Emerging from the crafted geometry of Roman dodecahedrons, artifacts that remind us how much form can matter without clear function, we continue our journey into another of history's perplexing enigmas. This time, we move from human craftsmanship back into the earth itself, where nature and mystery converge in a remote region of western China. Here, in the shadow of a mountain and beside a salty lake, lie formations that have puzzled explorers and scientists alike for decades. The Baigong Pipes. In the Kaidam Basin of Qinghai Province, near the town of Delingha, lies Mount Baigong, also called White Mountain, a reddish, weathered hillside rising from a harsh, high-altitude plateau. At its base and within its weathered crags, curious cylindrical structures protrude from rock faces, soil, and even the nearby Tuosu, Tosan, lake. To the untrained eye, they might resemble rusted metal conduits, remnants of an ancient plumbing system long forgotten. Yet these are not relics of a known civilization's infrastructure. They are naturally formed features whose origin is not immediately apparent. First drawn to these formations in the 1990s during exploratory surveys of the region, scientists and writers alike documented hundreds of such pipes in and around a cave opening and scattered along the lakeshore, ranging in diameter from a few centimeters to nearly half a meter. Some appear to run deep into the mountain, others angle into the earth or out toward the lake's salty waters. The stark, isolated setting, far from modern settlements or industrial activity, amplifies the sense of bewilderment. Material analyses have added to the intrigue. Early laboratory tests suggested the structures contained high proportions of ferric oxide, iron oxide, and abundant silicon dioxide and calcium oxide, consistent with minerals found in the surrounding rocks. a small percentage of the material defied easy classification. Thermoluminescence dating hinted at ages that might far exceed the earliest known human metallurgy in the region, suggesting these formations long predate local human activity. The shape and placement of these tubes have inspired a range of interpretations, from the scientifically grounded to the highly speculative. One mainstream explanation, supported by further tests, posits that the Baigong Pipes are the product of natural geological processes. Over vast spans of time, sediments rich in minerals may have filled spaces once occupied by organic material, such as the roots of ancient trees, until those spaces hardened into rock and the original organic matter decayed. What remains are cylindrical casts that resemble pipes, but are, in essence, fossilized remnants of a long-vanished landscape. Similar structures have been documented in other parts of the world, such as ironstone cylinders found in soils of the southern United States, lending weight to this interpretation. Indeed, some tests have detected organic plant matter and microscopic growth rings within samples, suggesting a botanical origin consistent with root casts. This scientific perspective situates the pipes not as manufactured elements, but as geological echoes of a time when the Qaidam Basin supported vegetation and dynamic environmental processes. Nevertheless, the formations continue to capture the imagination precisely because they look so intentional. Their relatively uniform cylindrical shapes, clean passages, and distribution across different terrains, including beneath the lake bottom and along shorelines, raise questions that simple root fossil explanations may not fully satisfy. Could the unique geology of Mount Baigong and its surrounding basin have created conditions for exceptionally regular mineral formations? Or might there be unknown sedimentary mechanisms at work that mimic the appearance of engineered objects? Beyond geological hypotheses, the Baigong Pipes have become one of those artifacts that draw attention from fringe thinkers and alternative histories. Some have suggested that the site marks the remains of a prehistoric water or plumbing system, hinting at lost technologies and forgotten cultures. Others have even speculated, without evidence, that the array of tubes could be connected to ancient extraterrestrial activity or the remnants of a hidden civilization. Though these ideas lie outside mainstream scholarship, they reveal how the imagination seeks patterns and stories in the face of ambiguity. What makes the Baigong Pipes especially compelling is not just their form, but the context of their discovery. The remote wilderness, the proximity to lake and mountain, and the hint of antiquity suggested by dating tests. Is this a natural archive of Earth's deep geological past, where mineral and organic processes conspired to produce shapes that echo human engineering? Or are we witnessing a chapter of Earth's history that has yet to be fully deciphered by science, perhaps involving environmental conditions and timescales we are only beginning to understand? Some investigations have reported radiocarbon or thermoluminescent ages, suggesting the formations may be hundreds of thousands of years old, well before any known civilization in the region developed metalworking or complex architecture. If so, any suggestion of human influence must be weighed against the solid framework of geological transformation. Yet the evidence is incomplete, and the gap between what we can measure and what we imagine remains. In the end, the Baigong Pipes sit at the intersection of Earth processes and human curiosity. They challenge us to question the boundary between what is clearly natural and what appears engineered. They remind us that not every familiar shape reveals a clear purpose, and that sometimes nature itself can produce forms that feel intentional. As explorers sketch maps of Mount Baigong and scientists compare mineral signatures, the pipes remain, quietly embedded in this high plateau landscape, as enigmatic as ever. And so we are left to wonder, what deeper stories do these formations hold about the Earth's history, its ancient environments, and the processes that shape our planet? Are the Baigong Pipes a geological curiosity awaiting full explanation, or do they point toward patterns of history we have only begun to glimpse? the mystery endures, inviting further observation and reflection. From the strange geological formations of the Baigong Pipes, where earth and imagination intertwine, we turn now to a textual mystery that sits at the crossroads of ancient history and modern controversy. Unlike the objects we've explored so far, the Tulli Papyrus is not an object you can hold in a museum case. Instead, it is a story about a document that has vanished from view, but whose alleged contents continue to provoke debate and curiosity around the world. According to the tale that entered public consciousness in the mid-20th century, the Tulli Papyrus was said to be a fragment of an ancient Egyptian text, purportedly dating from the reign of Pharaoh Thutmose III in the 15th century BC. This era, a high point of Egyptian power and administration, was one in which scribes diligently recorded events large and small for the archives of the royal court and the powerful religious institution known as the House of Life. What set the Tulli Papyrus apart, at least in the popular imagination, was the claim that it described a strange phenomenon seen in the sky. Circles of fire appearing overhead, moving with unusual motion, shining more than the sun, and lingering in the heavens before ascending still higher. In the dramatic retellings that circulated beginning in the 1950s, these objects were said to have been witnessed by chroniclers and even reported to the pharaoh himself. Birds and fish were reputed to have fallen from the sky in the wake of the event, and so momentous was it that incense was ordered brought to appease the gods and ensure it would be remembered. For decades, this account has floated between two worlds, that of those who see it as potential evidence of ancient aerial phenomena, sometimes framed as unidentified flying objects, and that of scholars urging caution, skepticism, and closer scrutiny. But before we dive into interpretations, it's crucial to understand a fundamental complication. No one today has seen the original papyrus. The narrative of discovery centers on an Italian archaeologist, Alberto Tulli, who worked at the Vatican Museum's Egyptology department in the early 20th century. According to reports, Tulli encountered the papyrus during a visit to an antiquarian shop in Cairo, made a transcription of the hieratic script, and then stored his notes among his papers. After his death, these notes were examined by others, including Prince Boris de Rachewiltz, who published what he claimed was a translation of the transcription in 1953. Yet beyond these secondary reports and translations, the document itself has never been produced for verification. The Vatican Museum has no official record of possessing such a papyrus in its archives, and inquiries in the 1960s suggested that the artifact, if it ever existed, was lost among the personal effects of Tulli's family. Without the original, Egyptologists cannot authenticate its age, script, or content, and no scientific analysis has verified its existence as an ancient artifact. This absence of an original manuscript places the Tulli Papyrus in an ambiguous space between history and legend. Mainstream scholars view the story with deep skepticism, not because extraordinary celestial events could not occur, but because the evidence for this specific text is entirely secondhand, unverified, and surrounded by gaps in provenance. Some critics have gone further, suggesting that the transliteration and translation were assembled from fragments of other known Egyptian texts, or that the entire story of the papyrus's discovery may have been conflated with popular themes circulating in mid-20th century fringe literature. Despite these uncertainties, what does survive in print tells of imagery that captivated those who first encountered it. The translation attributed to de Rachewiltz describes fire-like circles appearing in the sky at a particular time of day, inducing fear among the scribes who witnessed them. The objects are noted for silent movement, luminous brightness, and an almost supernatural presence that confounded observers. Such descriptions have fueled countless discussions in the decades since, from serious historical inquiry to more speculative interpretations of ancient records. Proponents of the idea that the Tulli Papyrus might represent an ancient record of aerial phenomena point to Egypt's remarkable tradition of sky observation and celestial documentation. The ancient Egyptians were keen astronomers, tracking stars, planets, and astronomical cycles with precision, folding these observations into religion, agriculture, and governance. If such unusual occurrences were observed, they likely would have been recorded in some fashion, though usually within the symbolic language of Egyptian cosmology rather than literal reportage. Skeptics counter that even if a genuine papyrus lay behind the stories, the descriptions could easily be natural phenomena interpreted through a cultural lens. Bright meteors, comets, parhelia, sundogs, atmospheric reflections, and other atmospheric effects might have been rendered in dramatic language by scribes accustomed to blending observation with symbolic significance. Without the physical document to analyze, their claims remain hypothetical. Adding complexity to the debate, some researchers point out that accounts such as the Tulli narrative may have echoes in other ancient literature, where celestial events are couched in metaphor, divine intervention, or ritual interpretation. The line between recording an event and interpreting it spiritually is thin in ancient texts, and modern readers must navigate that boundary carefully. Then there is the wider context of the papyrus's resurgence in the mid-20th century, a period when interest in unidentified aerial phenomena and ancient mysteries was gathering momentum globally. Stories of strange sightings and objects beyond conventional explanation resonated with broader cultural themes and captured the public imagination. That such ideas would be projected back onto an alleged ancient text should prompt us to ask not only what the papyrus might have said, but also why the narrative gained traction in modern discourse. The Tulli Papyrus, whether authentic or apocryphal, raises deeper questions about the nature of evidence and the ways history is reconstructed from fragments, memory, and interpretation. It invites us to consider how ancient peoples understood the sky, how they recorded extraordinary events, and how those records, or stories about them, survive or are lost over time. In the absence of the original, we are left with traces, tantalizing descriptions, conflicting reports, and the enduring human urge to make sense of the unknown. As we turn our eyes to the heavens and to the records of those who watched them long before us, the question lingers: what did the scribes of the House of Life truly see that day? And how might we ever separate observation from interpretation in the stories that reach us? Flowing from the whispered wonders of ancient texts and cryptic passages, we now turn our gaze to a real subterranean labyrinth carved not by human hands in a workshop, but by nature itself over deep geological time, a place where myth, history, and speculation have intertwined for decades. This is Taos Caves, hidden in the heart of the Ecuadorian rainforest, a cavernous world that continues to draw explorers, scientists, and storytellers alike. High on the eastern slopes of the Andes Mountains, where dense green rainforest meets misty foothills, lies an unassuming mouth in the limestone rock, a vertical shaft plunging deep into darkness. This is Cueva de los Taos, named for the oil birds, Steatornis carapensis, that nest within its chambers and navigate its shadows using echolocation. From that initial opening, a cavern system unfolds in astonishing complexity. A network of tunnels stretching for kilometers, vast chambers that feel cathedral-like in scale, interconnected passages that rise and fall deep below the Earth's surface, and vertical shafts that echo with dripping water and unseen life. The mapped system extends more than 4.6 kilometers with a vertical range of over 200 meters, but much of it remains uncharted, hiding chambers that have never felt the touch of modern light. To the local Shuar people, the cave is far more than a geological wonder. It has long held spiritual significance, seen as a sacred place where the womb of the earth holds powerful spirits and ancestral memory. Generations of Shuar have descended its depths to collect oil bird fledglings, performing rites and offerings before entering, viewing the cave as both a source of sustenance and a portal to the unseen. Written references to Taos caves go back at least to the mid-19th century, but long before that, the Shuar knew and used the cave. The first European explorers and gold seekers ventured into its lower reaches in the 1960s. Soon afterward, the caves entered international awareness not only through scientific curiosity, but through the power of myth. In the late 1960s and early 1970s, a Hungarian-Argentine explorer named János Juan Moritz claimed to have found something extraordinary deep within its chambers, a so-called metallic library, plates of engraved metal said to contain ancient knowledge, possibly from a lost civilization or from unknown sources. This idea electrified the imagination, especially when amplified by the writings of Erich von Däniken, whose books popularized theories of lost knowledge and ancient visitation. Von Däniken's 1973 book, The Gold of the Gods, painted a picture of polished stone rooms, engraved metal tablets, and sculptural artifacts, items that, if verified, might rewrite aspects of human history. But here we encounter a profound tension between story and evidence. Despite the allure of these claims, no scholarly or archaeological confirmation of the metallic plates has ever been produced, and scientific expeditions have not uncovered material that unequivocally supports such legends. One of the most consequential efforts to investigate this place was the 1976 Taos expedition, organized by Stan Hall, a Scottish engineer inspired by von Däniken's narrative. This collaboration included scientists, speleologists, local guides, and even astronaut Neil Armstrong as an honorary president, a testament to the powerful blend of science, curiosity, and myth that surrounds the cave. The expedition did not uncover a cache of metal books, but it did yield rich discoveries of a different kind. Archaeologists documented human remains and artifacts dating back to around 3,500 BC, showing that the cave had long been part of human activity. Biologists recorded previously unknown species of bats, butterflies, and beetles, underscoring the cave's importance as an ecosystem as well as a historical site. Geologists, too, have offered explanations rooted in the ancient deep time of the Earth. The cave's limestone was carved over millions of years through a process known as karstification, where acidic groundwater slowly dissolves soluble rock, forming underground passages, chambers, and shafts. This natural process accounts for the cave's enormity and complexity without requiring human engineering. Yet the cave's sheer scale and the presence of seemingly polished rock surfaces have led some observers to question whether some areas could have been modified by human hands in prehistoric times. Is it possible that early cultures expanded natural chambers to suit ritual, shelter, or symbolic purposes? Or are those features simply the result of water, time, and mineral deposition interacting over epochs? These questions remain open because the cave has not been fully explored, and much of its interior is still mapped only in part. Other layers of mystery swirl around the cultural narratives tied to the cave. Local lore, independent of external sensationalism, speaks of deep spiritual realms and teachings accessible only to initiates. The Shuar's role as custodians of the cave means that access is traditionally guided by their knowledge and permission, a reminder that some narratives are woven into living cultural frameworks rather than archaeological catalogs. Modern explorations, including media-documented expeditions like those featured on television series, have brought advanced mapping technology into the cave's depths, revealing more passages and intricate formations. Some researchers have looked at potential alignments of light within the cave at solstices, suggesting an ancient awareness of celestial rhythms. But again, solid evidence tying such alignments to intentional design is absent or extremely tentative. Throughout these investigations, no definitive proof has been found of the famed metallic plates, artificial libraries, or lost civilizations alleged by early visitors and popular writers. That absence has not dampened speculation. Rather, it has deepened the enigma, prompting questions about how legends emerge and evolve when fact and narrative intersect. Standing at the entrance of Taos Caves today, one is struck by contrasts. The ancient whispers of human history etched in artifacts and human remains found within, the natural complexity of geology and biodiversity, and the persistent allure of myth that surrounds lost knowledge and hidden treasures. The cave's depths still hold passages not yet seen by modern eyes, ecosystems not yet fully classified, and perhaps histories that remain only partly revealed. And so we ask, in a world where both scientific inquiry and human imagination seek to understand the unknown, what remains hidden in the shadows of Taos Caves, awaiting discovery, interpretation, and perhaps a deeper understanding of the interplay between people, place, and the stories we tell? From the labyrinthine caves beneath the Ecuadorian rainforest, where history and myth converge in silent darkness, we now return to a very different kind of mystery, one rooted above ground in the gentle fields of rural France, where clay and chip revealed a puzzle that has divided scholars for nearly a century. This is the tale of the Glozel Tablets, an archaeological enigma that has persistently blurred the lines between discovery and doubt. In 1924, on a quiet plot of farmland near the hamlet of Glozel in central France, a young farmer's plow struck something unexpected, a cavity beneath the soil containing broken pottery, carved bones, and, most provocatively, small clay tablets covered in unfamiliar inscriptions. What began as a curious find quickly became one of the most controversial archaeological debates of the 20th century. The story unfolds on a misting morning in the rolling countryside of Allier, north of Vichy. 17-year-old Émile Frodin was working the field when his plow snagged on something buried. As he and his grandfather cleared soil from the depression, they uncovered an underground chamber lined with fired bricks and filled with thousands of objects: tools, ceramics, carved stones, figurines, and most strikingly, tablets etched with lines of signs that looked startlingly like an alphabet. Among these were some 100 inscribed ceramic tablets, each bearing lines of symbols arranged much like writing. To the untrained eye, these could resemble ancient alphabets. Some scholars and enthusiasts even noted parallels to the Phoenician script, a set of characters that would later influence many of the world's alphabetic systems. Yet the Glozel symbols have never been conclusively deciphered, and despite resemblances to languages such as Basque, Iberian, Latin, Hebrew, or Berber suggested by researchers over the years, no agreed-upon translation exists. Almost immediately, the find ignited passionate debate. Some believed the tablets and accompanying artifacts represented a previously unknown prehistoric culture with potentially ancient writing, possibly predating recognized early alphabets. Others saw inconsistencies and irregularities that suggested the objects were recent creations planted to appear ancient. By 1927, the controversy had grown so heated that an international commission of archaeologists was convened to evaluate the site. Their preliminary conclusions were guarded, with some experts asserting authenticity for certain objects and others denouncing them as forgeries. The implications were profound. If the tablets were genuinely prehistoric and inscribed with meaningful symbols, they might rewrite aspects of European prehistory. But political and scientific tensions ran high. Critics pointed out that the assortment of objects, tools, figurines, glass fragments, human bones, and inscriptions, spanned a bewildering range of styles and apparent time periods. Some items were datable to the Iron Age or Roman era, others to the medieval period, and some even appeared far too fresh for true antiquity. Early analyses suggested modern elements such as dyed fibers or tool marks inconsistent with ancient manufacture. Yet the story did not end in the 1920s. Advances in scientific dating techniques, including thermoluminescence analysis, later revealed that many of the ceramic pieces were in fact old, dating roughly between 300 BC and 300 AD, even if not all the finds could be neatly grouped in a single time frame. This evidence has challenged the simple label of forgery for every object from the site, suggesting a much more complex mix of genuine ancient artifacts and uncertain pieces. Part of the difficulty in interpreting the Glozel Tablets lies in stratigraphy, the layers of soil and context in which objects are found. Because much of the early excavation was carried out by enthusiastic amateurs before professional archaeological standards were firmly established, and because later investigators found items of varying ages in close proximity, establishing a clear chronology has proved almost impossible. Moreover, some of the objects may have been refired or reused in later periods, potentially resetting their thermoluminescent age and obscuring their true origin. The symbols themselves contribute to the mystery. Unlike the clearly understood script of ancient civilizations, such as Egypt or Mesopotamia, the Glozel inscriptions resist consistent patterning. Statistical analyses of a subset of tablets have suggested that the symbol sequences do not exhibit the patterns expected of a natural language, at least as we currently understand them, leaving open the question of whether the inscriptions are linguistic, symbolic, or something else entirely. Proponents of the site's significance argue that the unique context of Glozel, a place where artifacts of multiple periods coexist, may reflect layers of human occupation and cultural practice over millennia rather than a single hoax. They point to the chemical match between the clay used in the tablets and local soils, suggesting that the objects were made at or near the site itself rather than carried in from elsewhere. Some fringe interpretations even link the symbols to ancient migratory cultures or lost writing systems, though these remain speculative and unsupported by mainstream scholarship. Skeptics, by contrast, emphasize the possibility of intentional or unintentional mixing of objects from different eras, noting that novelty and controversy in the early days of modern archaeology sometimes led to confusion between genuine artifacts and modern imitations. Similar debates have surrounded other controversial sites and finds around the world, underscoring how difficult it can be to distinguish between ancient authenticity and later invention. What makes the Glozel tablets especially compelling is not simply the question of whether they are real, but what they tell us about the nature of discovery itself. They remind us that archaeology is as much about context as it is about objects, that the story of a find is bound to the methods used to uncover it, and that passion, bias, and interpretation often shape scientific narratives as much as empirical evidence. Perhaps most intriguing is Émile Fradin himself, who insisted on the authenticity of the site for his entire life, maintaining his version of events until he died in 2010 at the age of 103. Whether he was a misunderstood witness to ancient truth or an unwitting participant in a tangled archaeological episode, his steadfastness ensured that the debate continued long after the initial discovery. As we stand today, the Glozel tablets remain neither fully authentic nor conclusively disproven. They occupy a liminal space in archaeological history, where curiosity, controversy, and scientific challenge converge. They compel us to ask not only what these inscriptions might mean, but why they provoke such fervent disagreement. What if the tablets reflect a hybrid cultural tradition we have not yet deciphered? Or might they simply serve as a cautionary tale about the limits of interpretation in the absence of context? In the field at Glozel, among fragments of clay and bone, the answer remains just out of reach. And so we are left with a question that echoes through the debates of the last century. What secrets might still lie buried in the soil and in our assumptions, waiting for a new generation of inquiry to uncover them? Emerging from the deep darkness of Taos caves, where natural majesty and human imagination converge beneath the rainforest, we now turn to a tale that unfolds not in hidden caverns but on the open sea and sandy shores of Japan, a story that, like others we've explored, blurs the boundary between documented observation and enduring mystery. This is the legend of the Utsuro-bune, the hollow ship that reportedly washed ashore more than 2 centuries ago and entered Japanese chronicles as one of history's most puzzling encounters. It was February 22, 1803, on the coast of Hitachi Province, today's Ibaraki Prefecture, when a group of local fishermen noticed something curious bobbing in the cold waters of the Pacific. At first glance, it was not a typical boat or fishing vessel. Instead, it was a round dome-like object, roughly 3.3 meters high and 5.4 meters wide, drifting with the tide, its form unlike any ship known in Japan at the time. Because of its unusual shape, villagers called it Utsuro-bune, literally, hollow boat. The hull was described in contemporary accounts as part wood, part metal-clad, with a lower section sheathed in plates that could have been bronze or iron, and an upper dome fitted with several transparent windows. These panels were said to be sealed with tree resin, as if designed to keep water out, an odd detail for a traditional small craft, even in the late Edo period. The strange vessel washed ashore amid crashing waves and startled observers. When the fishermen drew the object onto the sand and cautiously approached, the story took an even more unusual turn. From within the hollow chamber emerged a young woman, described in the period texts as about 18 to 20 years old, with pale skin and reddish hair, wearing unfamiliar clothing and carrying a small box that she guarded closely. The villagers tried to speak with her, but she spoke in a language they did not recognize and could not understand. Inside the vessel, according to several 19th century accounts such as Toen Shosetsu, Hyoryu Kishu, and Ume no Chiri, the walls were inscribed with symbols in an unknown script, and the interior contained soft mats, provisions of food and water, and other supplies. Items that suggested the woman had traveled some distance or expected to dwell within the craft for a time. Yet the meaning of the inscriptions and the source of the supplies remained opaque to those who found them. After some deliberation and a sense of unease, the villagers decided not to detain the woman or attempt to bring her before authorities. Bound by uncertainty, and perhaps mindful of strict isolation policies of the period that severely restricted contact with outsiders, they returned her and the vessel to the sea, and the craft drifted back into the ocean, disappearing from view and leaving no further trace in official records. At first glance, the tale of the Utsuro-bune seems like a curious maritime oddity, an unusual boat and a foreign castaway. Yet what sets it apart are the specific details found in multiple documents from the early 19th century, repeated mention of the vessel's shape and construction, the enigmatic markings, the woman's unfamiliar appearance and language, and the mysterious sealed box whose contents were never revealed. These details prompt questions that simple explanations struggle to answer fully. Mainstream scholars and folklorists generally treat the Utsuro-bune story as a piece of Japanese folklore, rooted in Edo period narrative traditions. During this era, collections of unusual tales and anecdotes were popular, and curious stories circulated widely in both written and oral form. It is not uncommon in folklore for foreignness, whether manifested as unfamiliar dress, strange speech, or unfamiliar craft, to be woven into narratives reflecting a culture's encounter with the other. Japan's long period of isolation, known as sakoku, magnified such impressions. Foreigners were rarely seen, and contact with outsiders was highly restricted, making the appearance of someone unfamiliar all the more striking. Researchers such as Japanese professor Kazuo Tanaka have investigated the legend within this cultural and historical context, noting that round, disc-like boats were not entirely unknown in Japan. Tarai bune, tugboats, and other small craft existed, but that later descriptions likely embellished their appearance with exotic details such as glass windows and metal plating to satisfy the imagination of readers or listeners. In this view, the Utsuro-bune may be a composite of maritime craft knowledge, narrative tradition, and symbolic storytelling. Yet the persistence of specific details across multiple independent texts also invites deeper inquiry. Why do the accounts agree on certain core elements, the shape of the vessel, the unusual appearance of the woman, the script on the interior walls, while allowing variation in others? Is it possible that the story reflects a real event recorded through the lens of cultural interpretation rather than a purely fictional invention? Or does the consistency owe more to shared folklore templates, repeated and refined across decades of retelling? Alternative interpretations, though less accepted among academic historians, form part of the story's allure. Some commentators note that the described shape of the Utsuro-bune resembles more modern images of unidentified aerial craft, disc-like forms with windows and smooth surfaces, and have likened the incident, in retrospect, to a pre-modern close encounter narrative. Others speculate that the tale may have been influenced by reports of European castaways or shipwreck survivors whose appearance and language were unfamiliar to isolated Japanese communities. Yet there is no documentary evidence tying the Utsuro-bune to any specific foreign vessel or verified maritime incident. The box the woman held, refused to be opened or touched, adds another layer of mystery. In some Japanese folk traditions, boxes carried by wandering figures, such as the tamatabako in the tale of Urashima Taro, symbolize sealed knowledge or forbidden gifts. The refusal to open the box may reflect narrative motifs about sacred secrecy or boundaries between worlds, rather than a literal object of unknown origin. Whether the box contained food, keepsakes, or symbolic meaning, it remains one of the most intriguing, unresolvable details of the narrative. The Utsuro-bune story endures partly because it resists being pinned down as purely historical fact or pure fiction. It exists in a space where cultural imagination, social context, and human curiosity intersect. A space similar to the other mysteries we have explored in this series, where testimony, tradition, and interpretation interact without yielding a definitive answer. And so, standing on the shores of 19th century Hitachi, among fishermen who saw something they could not fully explain, we are drawn into a question that reaches beyond time and place. What happens when a community encounters the unfamiliar? Is the Utsuro-bune a literal record of a strange vessel and its occupant? A symbolic tale reflecting cultural boundaries? Or a blend of human experience and narrative invention shaped over decades? The hollow ship itself may have vanished back into the waters, but the questions it raises continue to drift through history, inviting us to ponder not only what was seen, but how we make sense of the unknown. Sense flowing from the enigmatic tale of the Utsuro-bune, where perception and narrative intersect on an isolated beach, we now return to another mystery grounded in physical form and ancient intention. The nearly perfect stone balls that dot a remote river delta in Costa Rica. Objects that speak to a lost people and provoke questions that echo through time. These are the Diquís stone spheres, silent monoliths of rock whose purpose and meaning continue to elude full explanation. In the lush, tropical plains of the Diquís Delta, where the Sierpe, Taraba, and Grande rivers weave through dense rainforest toward the Pacific Ocean, something extraordinary lies half-buried under centuries of sediment and soil. Here, hidden beneath the earth and once revealed by bulldozers clearing land in the 1930s, were hundreds of stone spheres, some no larger than a fist, others as enormous as a small room. These smooth, near-perfect orbs, carved from dense volcanic rock, seemed almost surreal amid the tangled roots and vines of the jungle. The spheres range widely in scale, Many are modest, barely a few centimeters across. Others measure over 2 meters in diameter and weigh many tons. The largest are monumental. One found in the region is nearly 9 feet across and tips the scales at an estimated 26 tons. Their sheer size and sculptural precision arrest any observer's attention, and their number, more than 300 documented spheres, creates the sense of a collective language etched in stone across the landscape. These spheres are now widely acknowledged by archaeologists to be the creation of the pre-Columbian Diquís culture, a society that thrived in this part of Central America from roughly 500 to 1500 AD. They were discovered as the rainforest fell and soil was turned for banana plantations, exposing objects that had slumbered unseen for centuries. Later studies confirmed that these spheres were not a natural formation but human-made, carved from igneous rocks such as gabbro, granodiorite, and occasionally limestone or sandstone. The craftsmanship points to deliberate shaping and polishing, work that could have taken generations of skill to master without metal tools. Many spheres were found in relation to ancient settlements, positioned in clusters or alignments near the remains of platforms, paved plazas, and burial sites that belonged to the hierarchical chiefdom societies of the Diquís. In these contexts, the spheres seem to have belonged to a broader cultural and perhaps political landscape, displayed at the entrances to important structures or sitting in intentional geometric patterns across open spaces that once pulsed with human activity. The UNESCO World Heritage designation of the pre-Columbian chiefdom settlements with stone spheres of the Diquís acknowledges both their archaeological importance and the enduring mystery that surrounds them. Despite decades of research, scholars still cannot say with certainty why the spheres were made or what they meant to the people who carved them. These artifacts are distinctive not only for their near-perfect geometry and impressive scale, but also for the sheer density and distribution of their numbers. The craftsmanship required to produce such shapes is remarkable. Researchers believe artisans used harder stones to hammer and grind larger boulders into roughly spherical forms, then polished them with sand and other abrasives. This method would have required careful planning and immense effort, especially for the largest orbs. In some cases, unfinished spheres and rough blocks found in nearby hills suggest that stone was quarried and worked at different sites before being placed with intention in settlement areas. Yet despite these insights into how they were made, the question of why they were made remains wide open. One of the most straightforward interpretations among archaeologists is that the spheres served as status symbols or markers of social rank, objects that visually signaled wealth, power, or prestige. Their placement at the entryways to elite residences or central plazas supports this view. Beyond social symbolism, some researchers have suggested that astronomical alignments may lie behind certain arrangements of spheres. Their placement in straight lines or geometric patterns has prompted hypotheses linking them to the cycles of the sun, moon, or stars, perhaps serving as markers or mnemonic devices tied to agricultural or ceremonial calendars. Yet because many spheres were moved from their original positions, scattered by plantation clearing, looting, or relocation, the evidence for such astronomical patterns remains tantalizing but inconclusive. Another line of thought considers the spiritual or cosmological significance of the sphere as a universal form. Across many cultures, the circle and sphere are potent symbols, expressing concepts of unity, completeness, and the cosmos itself. Could these spheres have embodied a sacred geometry, reflecting deeply held beliefs about the world, the heavens, or the life cycle of human beings? If so, the stones may have been more than physical markers. They may have been tangible expressions of thought and identity distilled into stone. The absence of written records from the Diquís culture complicates any attempt to link the spheres to specific myths, rituals, or cosmologies. What survives are the stones themselves, and the archaeological context in which they were found. Farm workers and banana plantation crews brought many spheres to light, but they also destroyed or displaced much of the original stratigraphy, making it harder for archaeologists to reconstruct the precise relationships between objects and human activity. Over time, spheres have ended up far from their original settings. Some have been displayed as ornaments in government buildings, museums, and private collections around the world, including sites far from Costa Rica's forests. Others remain in place within protected archaeological parks where careful restoration and conservation efforts are ongoing. These efforts aim to stabilize stones that have weathered centuries of tropical climate, erosion, and biological growth, preserving both their material substance and the questions they embody for future study. There have always been fringe theories too, as is often the case with artifacts that resist simple explanation. Some speculate that the spheres could have been markers of lost continents, secret codes of cosmic alignment, or the remnants of advanced prehistoric knowledge that vanished without leaving a textual trace. These ideas are not supported by mainstream archaeology, but their very existence highlights the awe such objects inspire, and the human instinct to find meaning in form. What we do know is that the Diquís stone spheres stand as testaments to human creativity and deliberate effort in a time and place from which so few physical records remain. The labor required to shape, move, and position these massive stones invites reflection on the social organization, values, and motivations of a people who lived long before modern machinery. What rituals did they perform in the shadow of these spheres? What stories did they tell about their origins and destinies? Stories that have since vanished. And so, as shadows fall across the ancient plains of the Diquís Delta, and the spheres rest in silent testimony to a vanished world, we are left with a question that reaches beyond archaeology into the realm of human imagination. What deeper meanings might these stone orbs hold, and what has been lost in the silence between their curves and our curiosity? The mystery endures, inviting us to look more closely at the stones, the land, and the lives that once shaped them. Flowing from the silent orbs of Costa Rica's Diquís stone spheres, which echo a vanished culture's intent without a single written word, we now turn to an artifact that does speak, or at least appears to. Yet its voice, like its origin, is clouded in uncertainty and debate. On the windswept plains of the upper Midwestern United States, amid ancient pines and rolling fields worn smooth by glaciers, stands, or once stood, a weathered slab of stone whose runic markings have stirred deep questions about who traveled here and when. This is the story of the Kensington Runestone, an object that has challenged conventional history and invited generations of inquiry and skepticism alike. In the autumn of 1898, a Swedish-American farmer named Olof Öhman walked with his sons through a clearing near the Red Lake area of Minnesota, roughly 100 miles west of the present-day Canadian border. The air was crisp, the ground littered with fallen leaves, and the forest quiet except for the distant cawing of crows. Öhman bent to clear away soil from a partially buried stone and, to his surprise, uncovered a slab more than 2 feet tall, etched with unfamiliar characters. The markings resembled runic script, the angular alphabet used by the Norse peoples of northern Europe during the early and high Middle Ages. Carved into the surface of the gray stone were numerous runes, organized into lines that were immediately striking in their clarity and craftsmanship. As word of the discovery spread through Scandinavian immigrant communities in Minnesota, excitement grew. Could this be evidence of pre-Columbian contact with North America long before Columbus set sail in 1492? Öhman took the stone to local scholars and church leaders. Soon, linguists and runologists from larger cities examined the inscriptions, which purportedly told a narrative, an account of a Viking expedition that journeyed deep into the continent in the 14th century. According to the translation accepted by many early proponents, the text recounts that 8 Gotaland men and 22 Norwegians explored the area in 1362, only to have 10 of their number perish. The surviving members then carved their tale into stone before returning east. If authentic, the Kensington Runestone would significantly expand our understanding of Norse exploration beyond the well-documented settlement at Lonceau Meadows in Newfoundland, Canada, which itself dates back to around AD 1000 and stands as the earliest proven European foothold in the Americas. But the Minnesota stone suggested a different kind of journey, an inland trek across forests and lakes, perhaps connected to long-forgotten chapters of exploration. The early 20th century saw a wave of enthusiasm. Newspapers published photographs of the ruins. Lectures and books proposed that Norse seafarers had pushed far beyond the Atlantic shores, plunging into the heart of the continent long before Europeans supposedly discovered the New World. Yet as interest mounted, so too did criticism and scrutiny. Skeptics pointed first to the linguistic content of the inscription. While some runes on the stone correspond to authentic medieval forms, others appear in shapes or combinations that did not align well with known Norse inscriptions from the 14th century. Some scholars argued that the text contained runes unknown in medieval Scandinavia, or stylistic features more consistent with 19th century runic revivalism, a period when interest in Viking heritage and runes surged among Northern European immigrants. Beyond the linguistic debate, questions arose about the context of the find itself. Unlike most archaeological discoveries made through careful excavation, the runestone was uncovered by Oman during routine clearing of land, without systematic documentation of its original position. Its discovery in disturbed soil raised the possibility that it had been buried intentionally in modern times, rather than lying undisturbed for centuries. Radiocarbon dating, of course, could not be applied directly to the stone, but attempts to understand its age through geological and environmental analyses have yielded ambiguous results. Some researchers observed surface weathering consistent with exposure over a long period, while others suggested that the wear could be reproduced in shorter times under the specific climatic conditions of Minnesota. The controversy intensified as runologists and historians took opposing stances. Scholars associated with academic institutions generally expressed deep skepticism, viewing the Kensington Runestone as a 19th century creation, perhaps a hoax born of national pride or nostalgic imagination among Scandinavian settlers. These critics noted that no other credible Norse artifacts had been found in the region, and that known patterns of Norse exploration favored coastal voyaging over inland forays. Yet defenders of the stone's authenticity countered that absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. They pointed to the vast stretches of forest and waterway that remain only partially surveyed by archaeologists, suggesting that Norse travelers, if they had indeed crossed from Newfoundland via rivers and portage routes, might have left few traces beyond this singular inscription. Some proposed that the runestone could represent a lone exploratory mission rather than evidence of sustained settlement. Over the decades, additional stones with runic inscriptions have been claimed in North America, though none have stirred as much debate as the Kensington Runestone, and most have been dismissed for lack of credible context or scholarly verification. The Minnesota stone nonetheless became a cultural icon, especially in local communities and among enthusiasts of Viking history. Replica runestones were created, lectures held, and museums displayed the artifact as a subject of fascination. In 1978, the Minnesota Historical Society acquired the original stone, and it now resides in a climate-controlled exhibit, its runes carefully preserved, its story accessible to generations of visitors. Yet behind the glass and interpretive panels is a question that refuses a simple answer. Is this truly a medieval Norse relic, a message from explorers who ventured far beyond the known boundaries of their world? Or is it a product of 19th century imagination, shaped by nostalgia and crafted to inspire wonder or skepticism. Some scholars in recent years have taken a nuanced view, proposing that the stone might be the result of multiple influences, a genuine medieval artifact altered or recarved in later times, or a local creation inspired by fragments of Norse lore carried across the Atlantic by immigrants, and then intended to commemorate rather than authenticate a Viking presence. In this line of thought, the stone becomes not just a relic, but a symbol of cultural memory and identity. What remains clear is that the Kensington Runestone has never been isolated from its human story. The hands that carved its characters, the landscape that cradled it, and the generations who have argued over its meaning. Unlike the silent spheres of Diquís, which tell no textual story at all, the runestone offers words and invites reading, yet the language it presents resists resolution. As one stands before the stone today, considering its chiseled characters and imagining the hands that made them, one is struck by the layers of mystery that surround it. Did a Norse party once stand on this land, leaving their mark in script before fading from history's record? Or is this mark itself a message from another time, a creation imbued with as much meaning for its makers as it now holds for us? In the quiet expanse of the Minnesota plains, the answer remains just out of reach, inviting us to ask not only what the runestone says, but what it means, and what secrets might still lie hidden in the whispers of the wind and the stones underfoot. As we move from landscapes shaped by human hands and nature's deepest mysteries, we now turn to an object that seems to bridge the worlds of technology, history, and imagination. A small clay vessel unearthed nearly a century ago that has stirred debate about the limits of ancient ingenuity. This is the story of the Baghdad Battery, sometimes called the Persian Battery, a curious artifact that has prompted scholars and storytellers alike to wonder if ancient craftsmen might have stumbled upon the principles of electricity long before modern science articulated them. In 1936, near the ancient city of Ctesiphon, once a thriving capital of the Parthian and later Sasanian empires in what is now Iraq, workers excavating the ruins of a long-forgotten site called Kujut Rabu uncovered something unexpected. A small clay jar, shaped roughly like a modern jug, about 13 to 15 centimeters tall, containing a set of metal components that seemed strangely out of place with its era. Inside the jar sat a rolled copper cylinder, and within that, an iron rod secured by natural asphalt that acted as a stopper. The metal pieces, corroded by time and exposure, suggested that at some point the interior might have housed a liquid, its residue indicating what could have been an acidic solution such as vinegar or wine. When such a solution is added to copper and iron in modern experiments, it creates a small electrochemical reaction, generating a weak electrical current. This configuration, the combination of dissimilar metals separated by an electrolyte, was startlingly familiar to early 20th century archaeologists, who saw in it a resemblance to a galvanic cell, a fundamental component of modern batteries. If such an object could produce even a modest charge, it would predate the invention of the first documented battery by more than a millennium, well before Alessandro Volta's celebrated voltaic pile in 1800. Wilhelm König, the German archaeologist who first described the find in detail, proposed exactly this interpretation in a 1938 paper. König suggested that the jar may have functioned as a battery, possibly used for electroplating metals such as gold onto other surfaces, or even for some kind of electrotherapy. These ideas were radical, given that there are no known examples of electroplated artifacts from the Parthian or Sasanian eras. In the years that followed, scientists and experimenters attempted to test König's hypothesis by building replicas of the device. When filled with an acidic electrolyte like vinegar or lemon juice, these replicas could indeed generate a small voltage, often around 1 volt or slightly more, sufficient in principle for simple electrochemical processes. Yet such a result does not prove purpose. It only shows potential. As one expert noted, just because something could be done doesn't mean it was done. Mainstream archaeologists remain cautious. Many point out that there is no contemporaneous written record or archaeological context describing the use of electricity or electrical devices in ancient Mesopotamia. Additionally, other similar jars found at nearby sites, such as Seleucia, appear to contain wrapped plant matter or papyrus scrolls, suggesting that they may have had a religious or storage function rather than a technological one. In fact, objects resembling the Baghdad Battery have been interpreted as containers for sacred scrolls or ritual materials. The metal components may have served as weights, seals, or symbolic inclusions rather than electrodes in a cell. This alternative explanation aligns more closely with what is known about Parthian and Sasanian religious practices and artifact assemblages. Yet the intrigue of the Baghdad Battery lies precisely in this tension, between its possibility and its ambiguity. To imagine that artisans of the early centuries of the first millennium recognized that dissimilar metals in an electrolyte could produce an electrical effect raises fascinating questions about the extent of empirical knowledge in the ancient world. Could craftspeople have observed this phenomenon accidentally and used it for practical or symbolic purposes? Or were the similarities to modern batteries coincidental, a side effect of leaving a jar filled with simple metals and trapped liquids? The gap between observation and understanding is critical here. Modern science defines electricity and galvanic principles with rigor. Ancient cultures often understood natural phenomena through a framework of spiritual or symbolic meaning, rather than scientific abstraction. Even if the artifact produced a measurable electrical effect, the question remains: how would its creators have interpreted that effect? Was it practical, spiritual, or simply incidental? This debate has inspired more speculative theories as well. Some have proposed that the Baghdad Battery may have been used in electrotherapy, a form of treatment intended to relieve pain or induce healing. Others have wondered if the device could have been part of decorative processes, such as gilding metal surfaces, although no electroplated examples have been found from the period. Yet another fringe idea suggests that such objects, if capable of producing shock or light, might have been used in ritual contexts, where sudden sensations would reinforce spiritual experiences. However, these interpretations remain open questions rather than established conclusions. Without clear textual evidence, inscriptions, or additional contextual artifacts, the true purpose of the Baghdad Battery remains elusive. Its existence reminds us that technology and symbolism often overlap in the archaeological record, and that the absence of written explanation forces us to consider multiple perspectives. The artifact story also carries a modern tragedy. The original pieces were housed in the Iraq Museum until the turmoil of the early 21st century, when looting and conflict disrupted one of the world's great archaeological collections. The whereabouts of the original jar and its companions are now uncertain, compounding the difficulty of studying them with contemporary scientific tools. Yet, even in fragments and photographs, the Baghdad Battery continues to fascinate. It invites us to reflect on what we think we know about ancient ingenuity, and how easily that understanding can be challenged by a single object that looks familiar, yet defies easy categorization. Was this device a functional electrochemical cell known and used for specific purposes, or a ceremonial object whose accidental electrochemical properties were never its intended function? As we ponder this small clay vessel from the dusty ruins of Mesopotamia, we are reminded that history is not just a sequence of dates and texts, but a tapestry woven of human curiosity, experimentation, and sometimes mystery. The Baghdad Battery remains not just an artifact, but a question waiting at the intersection of science, culture, and time. What other discoveries might reshape our understanding of ancient knowledge, if only we knew how to read them? Flowing from the clay vessel that hinted at unexpected ancient ingenuity, we now turn from the material to the mysterious and the human. A story whispered through centuries, rooted in a small English village yet echoing far beyond its fields. This is the tale of the Green Children of Woolpit, a narrative that bridges folklore, eyewitness report, and enduring speculation about what it means to encounter the truly unfamiliar. Imagine the rolling countryside of Suffolk, England, in the 12th century, a landscape of open fields, meandering rivers, and small villages clustered around parish churches. Among these hamlets was Woolpit, its name derived from the wolf pits, deep ditches used to trap wolves that threatened livestock. In this rustic setting, with its timber-framed homes and simple agrarian rhythms, an event was recorded that has puzzled historians and storytellers alike for more than 800 years. The earliest chroniclers, including Ralph of Coggeshall and later William of Newburgh, describe how, one day, the villagers of Woolpit found something unusual near one of the abandoned wolf pits. Emerging timidly from the woods were two children, a boy and a girl, whose skin, remarkably, was green in color. They wore clothing of unfamiliar fabric and appeared bewildered, hungry, and frightened. Their strange appearance and behavior drew a crowd, and they were brought to the nearby manor of Sir Richard de Calne, where they were given food and shelter. The green tint of their skin was the first thing noted, not a pale, sickly green, but an unusual, vivid hue unlike any condition known to the villagers. Attempts to offer them bread initially failed. The children refused familiar food and instead begged for raw beans. Only after several days did they accept bread, and even then with hesitation. Some chroniclers speculated that their diet of raw legumes might have induced the green coloration, or that their appearance reflected malnutrition or disease unfamiliar to local observers. Yet no illness recorded in medieval England reliably produced such an effect, leaving the detail unresolved and intriguing. The children could not speak any known local language. Their cries and gestures were unintelligible, and their names, if they had them, were initially beyond comprehension. It took months before the girl, who was older and more communicative, began to learn English, and only later did the boy slowly follow. According to the accounts, they eventually spoke of a place called St. Martin's Land, a realm of perpetual twilight where everything was green and where they claimed to have originated. In their descriptions, fields, houses, and even the light itself bore a verdant shimmer, a detail that has fueled speculation about the nature of their supposed homeland. As the children adjusted to life in Woolpit, the villagers recorded more of their story. They claimed to have wandered from their home through a subterranean passage or tunnel, emerging into a bright land quite unlike their own. Yet when pressed for more detail, their narratives were inconsistent. The boy, in particular, changed his story frequently and was eventually said to have died of illness. The girl, more articulate, assimilated into local society, taking on Christian baptismal rites and eventually marrying a local man. What makes the Woolpit tale distinct from typical folk tales or hagiographical legends is its specificity of detail and early recording by chroniclers attempting a factual account. Ralph of Coggeshall, writing in Chronicon, did not frame the children as symbolic figures. Rather, he described them as witnessed by many villagers, watched over for months, and gradually integrated into the community. William of Newburgh's account, written decades later, also treats them as real individuals whose presence was extraordinary but witnessed by credible observers. Yet the green skin remains one of the most puzzling aspects. Medieval chroniclers offered no medical explanation, and modern scholars have proposed several possibilities. Some suggest that the green tint might have been due to chlorosis, a form of iron deficiency anemia known in later centuries, which can give skin a greenish pallor under certain conditions. Others point to nutritional deficiencies or rare metabolic disorders that can affect skin color. Yet none of these explanations convincingly produce the vivid green described in the primary accounts, leaving room for wonder rather than resolution. Another line of interpretation situates the story within the symbolic world of medieval morality and cosmology. In this view, the children's journey from another land, their unusual appearance, and their gradual assimilation may reflect cultural themes about outsiders, conversion, and transformation. The medieval mind was deeply attuned to the idea of thresholds, places where the known world met the unknown, and thresholds of experience where individuals passed from one state of being to another. The unnamed green land could symbolize spiritual otherness, a liminal realm where earthly rules did not apply. Folklorists have noted parallels between the Woolpit narrative and broader European traditions of otherworldly realms, including fairy folk, subterranean worlds, or visitors from distant lands. In Celtic and Anglo-Saxon lore, beings from hidden places sometimes appeared on the edges of human habitations, speaking unknown tongues and exhibiting strange traits. Yet the Green Children narrative differs in its specificity. This is not merely a story about strange visitors, but about children who survived, learned, and were absorbed into the village social fabric. More speculative interpretations look beyond medieval symbolism to consider actual encounters with unknown cultures or far-flung peoples. Could the children have come from a previously uncontacted group displaced by conflict or catastrophe? Could they have wandered from a remote settlement with dietary practices unfamiliar to the chroniclers, resulting in an unusual skin hue? Some have even wondered if linguistic isolation, a distinct language group never before heard in Suffolk, could have contributed to the children's initial incomprehensibility. But none of these theories account fully for the breadth of details in the accounts, and there is no archaeological record of a lost subterranean culture beneath Woolpit or its environs. Then there are the more modern fringe hypotheses that endow the tale with encounters from beyond the known world. These ideas, that the children came from a parallel realm, distant landscape, or even another dimension, belong more to speculative fiction than to grounded historical inquiry. Yet their very existence speaks to the strangeness and endurance of this narrative, a story that resists tidy categorization and invites imagination precisely because its core elements remain unsettled. Perhaps most compelling is the human dimension of the story. The Green Children, regardless of origin, endured fear, hunger, misunderstanding, and eventual acceptance. They adapted to a society whose language, customs, and beliefs were foreign to them. A transformation echoed in the journeys of many real historical migrants who cross cultural thresholds with little more than survival instinct and resilience. In the Woolpit narrative, this adaptation is literalized in vivid color and dramatic circumstance, yet it resonates with a deeper truth about the human capacity to bridge worlds, whether through circumstance or story. What truly happened in Woolpit so long ago, whether a medical anomaly, cultural encounter, allegory, or something else entirely, remains unresolved. The narrative endures not because it fits neatly into historical categories, but because it refuses closure. What was St. Martin's Land, if anything? Were the children truly outsiders to that world, or reflectors of anxieties and hopes embedded in medieval society? In the quiet fields and ancient churchyard of Woolpit, the questions linger as they have for centuries. Who were the Green Children, and why did they appear at that moment in history? Their tale, enigmatic and evocative, invites us not only to ask what is possible, but to consider how the unknown shapes our understanding of the world and our place within it. And so we are left to wonder, what other stories lie buried in the folds of history, waiting for those willing to listen deeply to the echoes of the past? As we move from ancient stories of people who might have walked from another world into our own, we now turn to a mystery grounded in both place and bones, a controversy that has stirred headlines, scientific inquiry, and profound questions about how we interpret the past. Near the famous desert lines etched into the Peruvian earth, deep within the arid landscape that preserved millennia of human history, a set of mummified remains has become one of the most debated archaeological enigmas of the early 21st century, the so-called Nazca Mummies. The vast, sun-baked desert surrounding Nazca, Peru is familiar to the world for its massive geoglyphs, the Nazca lines, whose sweeping shapes and animal forms have puzzled and inspired for generations. But beyond those enormous grooves, the same dry climate and mineral-rich sands naturally preserve organic matter with extraordinary fidelity. In nearby burial grounds such as the Chowchilla Cemetery, archaeologists have recovered hundreds of mummified human remains dating from roughly 200 AD to the 9th century, their skin, hair, and clothing often intact thanks to the region's aridity and burial practices. It is from this broader context of genuine ancient mummies and prehistoric cultures that the modern story of the Nazca Mummies arises. Beginning around 2015, illegal grave robbers, huaqueros, and independent investigators began producing mummified figures from caves and tunnels near Nazca that did not resemble typical human remains. These specimens, some with elongated skulls, three-fingered hands, and diminutive stature, were presented as something outside the ordinary range of local human variation. They ranged in size from tiny figures under a meter tall to objects dressed in cloth and coated in a whitish deposit. The initial intrigue quickly spilled into international publicity. In September 2023, Mexican journalist Jaime Maussan, known for his involvement in investigations of unexplained phenomena, exhibited two such mummified bodies in front of the Mexican Congress, proposing that they could represent non-human entities. Maussan's presentation claimed that some features of the remains could not easily be reconciled with normal human anatomy, drawing comparisons in media coverage to images of alien-like beings from popular culture. Yet, even as these figures captured global attention, scientific scrutiny remained intense and unresolved. Peruvian authorities and forensic experts have examined some of the controversial specimens and provided sobering counterpoints to sensational claims. In investigations led by Peru's Ministry of Culture and forensic archaeologists, some of the bodies presented in sensational media were entirely discredited as authentic ancient remains. For example, experts concluded that figures intercepted at customs en route to Mexico were fabricated assemblages of animal bones and modern materials, joined with synthetic adhesives and combined in ways that mimic strange anatomy. According to these analyses, the mummies were not ancient, indigenous individuals and did not represent unknown species of any kind. Forensic archaeologist Flavio Estrada Moreno, among others, explained that some of the most publicized alien bodies were in fact constructed objects, not the product of prehistoric burial rites. These critiques were echoed by scientists speaking at professional conferences, where statements were issued condemning the manipulation of genuine cultural heritage for sensational narratives. One 2017 statement from international experts pronounced with confidence that many of the extraterrestrial mummies were hoaxes created from human and animal bone fragments and modern materials, not archaeological discoveries that rewrote human history. At the same time, the controversy has not entirely dissipated. Some researchers and enthusiasts point to DNA testing and other analyses they say support anomalous results, including claims that some genetic markers do not match known human populations. These interpretations, however, stem from tests performed under non-standard conditions, often without full peer review or rigorously documented provenance, and have not been published in reputable scientific literature. Without authenticated chain of custody, laboratory replication, and archaeological context, such claims remain speculative rather than evidentiary. Adding to the complexity, the origin of the remains' discovery has itself become part of the mystery. Because the earliest finds were not excavated under controlled archaeological conditions, the contextual information that might anchor them in time and culture is often lost or muddled. Some specimens reported by huaqueros were removed from original burial sites without proper documentation, making scientific analysis difficult and creating fertile ground for misinformation, sensationalism, and even legal disputes between private promoters and government authorities. Outside the realm of controversy, there is a broader and well-documented tradition of legitimate Nazca mummies and funerary practice across the region. At Chowchilla Cemetery, for example, archaeologists have found ceremonial graves where bodies were intentionally mummified using resin and wrapped in textiles, a practice that preserved not only the bodies but remarkable artifacts and clothing. These authentic mummies have shown evidence of cranial modification, a cultural practice in many pre-Columbian societies involving binding infants' skulls to alter their shape for symbolic or status reasons, alongside tattoos, evidence of disease, and ritual offerings. This dichotomy between true archaeological record and the contested mummies presented in popular forums highlights the challenge of separating sensational narratives from hard evidence. It also underscores why the Nazca region remains such a fertile ground for ancient mystery, not just because of possible alien claims, but because it is a landscape where authentic history and modern imagination intersect. The same desert that preserved ancient burials and the Nazca lines also becomes a stage for debate about who gets to interpret the past and on what basis. What is indisputable is that Peru's desert climate, its millennia-old cultures, and its human burials hold deep archaeological significance. Genuine Nazca mummies and associated artifacts continue to teach scholars about social structure, ritual, diet, health, and belief systems of pre-Columbian peoples whose legacy endures in textiles, ceramics, geoglyphs, and sacred tombs. The controversial mummies, whether fraudulent, manipulated, or misinterpreted, serve as a reminder of how passionately people want to connect with the unknown. And so the question remains not just what these objects are, but what our reactions to them reveal about our hunger for mystery. Do these disputed remains hint at a lost branch on the tree of life? Or are they cautionary tales about the fragility of evidence and the allure of the sensational? In the shifting sands near the Nazca lines, the mystery endures, inviting us to look deeper, question rigorously, and wonder what other secrets the desert still holds. Flowing from the contested Nazca mummies, where ancient landscapes and modern curiosity intersect, we turn now to another set of mysterious stone forms, this time in Europe's rugged heartland, where forests and river valleys conceal spheres that continue to spark debate among scientists, historians, and visitors alike. These are the stone spheres of Bosnia, enigmatic geological and archaeological features that have captured the imagination of many while resisting a settled explanation. In the gentle forests and riverbeds near the town of Zavidovici in Bosnia and Herzegovina, something unusual lies half-buried among moss, leaf litter, and undergrowth. Large, nearly perfect stone spheres, their smooth curves contrasting with the irregular shapes of the surrounding landscape. Some are no more than half a meter across. Others exceed 3 meters in diameter, weighing several tons and dwarfing the people who stand beside them. These spheres rest quietly on forest floors, near streams, and scattered across hillsides in several locations around central Bosnia. In the village of Grab alone, more than 20 of them lie nestled among old tombstones and woodland paths, while at sites like Podubravia, a massive sphere that may weigh tens of tons has only partially been uncovered, its round surface emerging from the earth like an enormous stone egg. At first glance, the shapes are almost surreal. How could such perfectly round forms exist in a landscape otherwise defined by jagged rock, tangled roots, and shifting riverbeds? And why do they appear in such disparate sizes and materials, some sandstone, others granite or mixed rock, yet all maintain such uniform geometry? These questions have drawn both casual travelers and serious researchers to the region. The story of the sphere's modern discovery is relatively recent. While locals undoubtedly noticed odd rocks for generations, systematic attention began in the early 2000s when researchers associated with the archaeological park, Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun Foundation, documented multiple locations containing stone spheres. Since then, dozens of spheres have been catalogued across Bosnia, including in places like Teočak, Varish, Zenica, and Ponikve. Scientists and geologists have studied these spheres with varying interpretations. Some propose that the round shapes could be natural geological formations known as concretions, features formed over vast spans of geological time when mineral-rich water precipitates and cements around a nucleus, resulting in spherical bodies within sedimentary layers. Such natural concretions are known in other parts of the world, including the famous stone spheres of Costa Rica. In this framework, the Bosnian spheres could be analogous to those natural processes, mineral cement building up around a central focus and hardening over millennia before exposure through erosion. Especially in river valleys where sediments have shifted and water flows are strong, such formations can be released from their matrices and appear as freestanding spheres. Yet, for many observers, the sphere's precision and distribution raise questions that a simple geological explanation doesn't fully address. Some of the larger spheres are nearly perfect in shape, with surfaces unusually round given the surrounding rock types, leading to suggestions that at least some might be deliberately shaped by ancient human hands. Preliminary analyses at material science laboratories such as the University of Zenica have even concluded that certain spheres buried near Zavidovici were poured in molds and show evidence of binding and hardening agents not typically present in local natural stone. Proponents of an artificial origin point out that this would situate Bosnia among only a handful of places globally where similar spherical objects have been documented, such as those in the Diquís Delta of Costa Rica. In Costa Rica, thousands of stone spheres were created and placed in intentional arrangements by prehistoric cultures, and researchers have interpreted them as powerful, symbolic, social, or ceremonial objects. The Bosnian spheres, if also shaped by humans, could hint at unknown prehistoric practices or cultural meanings that have not yet been understood in the European context. Yet the archaeological record in Bosnia lacks inscriptions, tools, or contextual artifacts directly associated with the spheres that would clearly indicate a specific culture or purpose. Without such evidence, the idea of deliberate prehistoric manufacture remains speculative. Mainstream geology and archaeology lean toward natural explanations, emphasizing the similarities between these balls and known spherical geological forms found elsewhere. Local lore and popular interpretation have added further layers to the mystery. In several villages, older residents tell stories of how these spheres emerged after a great storm in the 1930s, when torrents of rain exposed more of the rounded stones hidden beneath streambeds and hillsides. Others have built informal legends about spirits or ancient smiths who once walked the land, shaping stone into perfect forms. These stories, passed from generation to generation, speak less to hard evidence than to the human impulse to explain what seems inexplicable. In the nearby Stone Sphere Park, near Zavidovici, visitors today walk among these monoliths with a mix of curiosity and contemplation. Many come simply to see the remarkable forms. Others engage in meditation or yoga beside the balls, convinced they radiate a particular calm or energy. Whether such experiences reflect measurable phenomena or personal perception, they underscore the sphere's capacity to evoke a sense of connection that goes beyond their physicality. Scientific opinion varies even among specialists. Geologists emphasize that while spheres of this kind are unusual, they are not unique in the world's geological record and can arise without human intervention. Archaeologists note that intentional shaping of stone into spherical forms would represent a remarkable technological achievement for any prehistoric culture. And yet Bosnia's archaeological layers have not produced the suite of tools and contextual markers that typically accompany such complex craftwork. Part of the difficulty in answering these questions lies in the disturbed context of the finds. Many spheres were discovered outside stratified archaeological excavations, unearthed by natural erosion, local construction, or agricultural activity rather than systematic study. Without careful excavation and dating of associated sediments, establishing a clear age and cultural context becomes nearly impossible. This ambiguity leaves room for multiple interpretations to coexist, from the strictly geological to the culturally speculative. The Bosnian stone spheres also raise broader questions about how we understand prehistoric technology and the relationship between humans and their environment. If even a portion of the spheres were shaped by early societies, what purpose might they have served? Were they markers of territory, status symbols, ritual objects, or elements of a cosmological system now forgotten? In the absence of written records or associated artifacts, each proposed explanation remains conjectural, though thoughtful in its attempt to connect form and meaning. Comparative perspectives deepen the intrigue. Around the world, from Central America to New Zealand, spherical stone forms have been associated with human activity, cultural boundaries, and mythic symbolism. Yet in each region, the interpretation depends critically on archaeological context. Tools, habitation sites, art, and ceremonial spaces that clarify purpose. Bosnia's spheres, by contrast, stand alone, their silence as profound as their shape. In the quiet woods near Zavidovici, where moss creeps over ancient stone and sunlight filters through leaves onto perfect curves of rock, visitors often pause in quiet reflection. The spheres suggest both natural wonder and human mystery, inviting viewers to ponder deep time and the creative forces, natural or cultural, that shape the world. And so, as shadows lengthen across these enigmatic orbs and tourists walk among them in contemplation, one question lingers in the mind. Are these spheres the remnants of geological processes that shaped the Earth over millions of years? Or do they hold traces of ideas, practices, and technologies we have yet to fully understand? The mystery endures, waiting quietly in the Bosnian forest. As we stand at the crossroads of nature and history, the stone spheres of Bosnia continue to challenge our understanding of the past. They blur the line between the natural world and human craftsmanship, leaving behind more questions than answers. Whether they are the result of natural geological forces or the work of ancient hands, these stones force us to confront the limits of our knowledge and the mysteries still buried beneath the earth. They are more than just geological curiosities. They are symbols of a time when the earth itself seemed to hold secrets that we have yet to decipher. In an age where scientific advancement continues to push the boundaries of our understanding, the Bosnian spheres serve as a reminder of how much we still have to learn. They stand as silent witnesses to the interplay of time, culture, and the natural world, each one a puzzle that invites us to seek deeper, more meaningful connections with the past. Perhaps, in time, modern archaeology will uncover more about these stones, or perhaps their purpose will remain a captivating enigma, preserved forever in the shadow of the Bosnian forests. Until then, the spheres continue to captivate those who seek them out, drawing visitors from around the world to contemplate their origins and significance. They are a testament to the enduring human desire to explore, understand, and connect with the mysteries of our world. The stone spheres of Bosnia remind us that sometimes the most profound discoveries lie not in the answers we find, but in the questions that endure. From the silent mystery of Nazca's disputed mummies, where ancient landscapes stirred modern curiosity, we now turn to a different kind of map mystery, one that charts perception as much as geography. Centuries before satellite imagery and GPS, European cartographers filled in the blanks of the unknown world with names and expanses that reflected both what they knew and what they did not. Among these intriguing entries was a vast region labeled on maps as Tartary or Tartaria, a name that has since become the focus of both historical inquiry and modern debate. Unrolling a leather-bound atlas from the 17th or 18th century is like peering through a window into the mind of an early explorer. Inked coastlines promise shores yet unseen, mountain ranges are sketched with tentative lines, and unknown regions are marked with curiosity and caution. On many of these maps, stretching from the Ural Mountains across Siberia and deep into Central Asia, the word Tartaria commands vast territory, bounded on some charts only by the limits of the continent itself. These cartographic impressions record a world that was, at the time, poorly understood by European geographers. A place so vast and remote that it defied the familiar political borders of the day. The term Tartary was not meant to represent a unified empire in the way we understand nations today. Rather, it functioned as a geographical placeholder, a label for lands beyond the edges of detailed European knowledge, regions where nomadic tribes, shifting khanate and distant cities lay beyond the reach of frequent contact with Western scholars. Its presence on maps reflected not a singular political entity, but a cartographic shorthand for the sprawling reaches of Inner Asia and the Eurasian steppe. Look closely at a Carte de Tartarie by Guillaume de Lisle, a leading French cartographer of the early 18th century, and you can almost feel the awe with which Europeans regarded these distant lands. De Lisle's map, compiled from the reports of various travelers and stitched together from fragmentary reports, depicts ridges, rivers, and distant mountains that would have been familiar only to those who had crossed vast territories. But it also reveals the limits of European understanding. Blank spaces and speculative names where explorers' reports were scarce or contradictory. In the period from the 16th to the 19th centuries, maps regularly labeled large sections of Asia as Tartary, sometimes with additional qualifiers such as Great, Independent, or Chinese Tartary, to indicate political nuances or local dominions under Chinese influence. These names were not invented out of thin air, but were cartographic conventions inherited from earlier atlases and shaped by the fragmented knowledge that flowed back from distant courts, caravan routes, and missionary journeys. The presence of Tartaria on these maps tells us something profound about the practice of cartography itself. Maps are not just depictions of known land, they are also reflections of uncertainty. Before repeated overland exploration, before the telegraph, steamship, or Trans-Eurasian Railway, much of Asia's interior was a tapestry of shifting power, nomadic movement, and cultural diversity that resisted neat categorization by European scribes and placemakers. Tartary, as a label, was an admission of that complexity. Yet in the modern era, the archives of these old maps have taken on a curious second life, separate from scholarly cartographic history. Online communities have interpreted the appearance and later disappearance of Tartaria in global atlases in ways far removed from the original context. For some, those old maps are seen not as signposts of past uncertainty, but as evidence of a lost civilization, an advanced empire erased from mainstream historical narrative. This contemporary narrative has woven Tartaria into broader fringe theories that propose the existence of forgotten technologies, suppressed histories, and even mud-flood cataclysms that reshaped civilization. What fuels these interpretations is not merely the presence of the name on old parchment, but the power of the visual image itself. A map showing a massive landmass labeled Tartaria can, at a glance, evoke the idea of empire or domain, especially when stripped of the contextual captions and incremental annotations that historical cartographers used to indicate uncertainty. Maps were once as much speculative documents as they were authoritative ones. Artists, scribes, and geographers often filled uncharted spaces with labels and figures that might be only partially confirmed or reported secondhand. In academic circles, historians and map experts emphasize that the region called Tartary was never a cohesive political entity with centralized government, unified culture, or consistent borders. Instead, it was a mosaic of territories, home to Turkic, Mongolic, Manchurian, and other peoples whose social and political structures varied over time. References to the Tartars were often sweeping ethnographic terms used by Europeans to bundle diverse groups into a single category, much as earlier mapmakers labeled much of Africa or the Americas under broad headings long before detailed exploration revealed local complexity. The gradual disappearance of the term Tartary from maps in the 19th century coincided with the increase in detailed geographic exploration, imperial expansion, and the proliferation of more accurate regional maps that replaced broad, Western-centric labels with specific place names and political boundaries. As explorers, surveyors, and colonial administrators penetrated deeper into Central Asia, the need for a catch-all label diminished, and the cartographic language evolved accordingly. This shift in mapmaking also reveals something deeper about the evolution of knowledge. As contact increases and information accumulates, uncertainty contracts. Areas once labeled in vague strokes give way to detailed surveys that record rivers, mountain ranges, and settlements with precision. In this sense, old maps of Tartary are not so much relics of a lost civilization as they are historical artifacts of knowledge in transition, documents that capture the edge of what was known and what remained beyond reach. Yet the modern fascination with Tartaria also reflects a deeper human impulse, the longing for hidden histories, for narratives that challenge the familiar, and for the possibility that our understanding of the past remains incomplete. When people look at an old map and see not only geography but mystery, they tap into a timeless tension between evidence and imagination. This tension is not malicious, far from it. It testifies to how maps, like stories, shape our perception of the world. The maps labeled Tartary thus stand at the intersection of historical documentation and symbolic projection. On one hand, they are genuine records of a time when vast regions of the world were only partially known to European geographers, a testament to both human curiosity and the limits of early exploration. On the other hand, they have become touchstones for modern narratives about forgotten empires and suppressed knowledge, narratives that reveal just how powerful cartographic images can be when untethered from their original context. And so, as we spread out these old charts and let our eyes trace the sweeping expanse once called Tartaria, one question lingers like the horizon line on a fading map. What else might these lines and names conceal about the ways humans have understood their world, and what hidden threads of history remain to be faintly traced across the ever-shifting canvas of time? As we reflect on the Bosnian stone spheres, they become more than mere curiosities in the natural landscape. They transform into symbols of a past that may hold wisdom or knowledge we've yet to discover. Each stone, with its nearly perfect spherical shape, stands as a mute testimony to something deeper, something beyond the reach of conventional historical understanding. The mystery of these spheres challenges our perceptions of human history, offering us a glimpse into an ancient world that may have once understood the forces of nature in ways we can only imagine. In a world where technology and science continually uncover new insights about the past, the Bosnian spheres remind us that there are still many unanswered questions. They are relics of a time when humanity, or nature itself, may have held mastery over the world in ways that defy explanation. These stones, scattered across Bosnia's hills and riverbanks, are a testament to the complexity and depth of our planet's history. and as we study them, we are reminded of how much remains to be uncovered in the ancient layers of the earth. The story of the Bosnian spheres is far from over. As modern archaeology advances and new techniques allow for more precise dating and analysis, we may one day uncover the truth behind their origins. Whether they are the product of natural forces or human craftsmanship, they continue to captivate and inspire those who seek to understand the mysteries of the past. In many ways, the spheres act as a bridge between the known and the unknown, offering a point of connection to a forgotten history that beckons for exploration. For now, these enigmatic orbs remain silent, their secrets buried beneath the surface of the earth. Yet their presence continues to draw attention from scholars, tourists, and curious minds around the world. With each new discovery, we move closer to understanding not just the spheres themselves, but also the ancient people and cultures that may have left them behind. The unanswered questions they pose only serve to deepen our curiosity and ignite our imagination, urging us to keep searching for answers that may be just beyond our reach. In the quiet forests of Bosnia, amid the moss-covered stones and flowing rivers, the spheres endure, silently challenging us to look beyond the surface. They invite us to reflect on the mysteries of the world, on the stories waiting to be told, and on the idea that sometimes the greatest discoveries lie not in the answers we find, but in the questions we continue to ask. The Bosnian stone spheres stand as a reminder that history is far from fully understood, and the mysteries of our past may yet hold revelations that can change everything.